So when I tell you that this story is one of the scariest stories that I've ever told, believe me, because this story has me so freaked out. So with that being said, let's jump right into tonight's story. So grab your favorite tea and settle in, and let me tell you another scary Appalachian story, because of course, this is Tea After Midnight. This story comes from Hannah. Hey Savannah, I debated if I wanted to send you my story or not because I was afraid it would stir something back up. I really haven't gotten over what happened to me and my sister in the Appalachian Mountains a few years ago. We grew up in the mountains and have always enjoyed being outside. One of mine and my sister's favorite things to do is go ghost hunting. We've always been drawn in by the paranormal and have many stories from our childhood of ghostly encounters. But the story I'm sharing today is by far the scariest. Let me start by setting the scene. It was October of 2022. My sister was 20 and I was 23. We both had been trying to plan a spooky adventure for us to go on since we had gotten older and weren't able to do it as much now. My sister Janie had heard about this abandoned warehouse that was a few hours away from us that had a lot of history and apparently a lot of ghost sightings. We both agreed that this place would be perfect for us to go and explore. One of Janie's coworkers told her about it and said that they had actually experienced a few things there themselves. This made me excited because it had been a while since we had had a good scare. The day comes for us to head to this warehouse, and just by looking at Google Maps, I could tell that this place was in the middle of nowhere. The drive there for the most part was good until it said we were about 10 minutes away. My phone that was plugged in on the charger and was at 100% battery dies out of nowhere, and I couldn't get it to turn back on. My sister pulls up the address on her phone, but her phone starts glitching really bad and wouldn't give us the directions. I just kept driving and eventually it pops back up on her phone and said we were 2 minutes away. We turn right onto the road and her phone shuts off completely. She could not get it to turn back on, just like mine. As I'm driving, we eventually come up on this big rundown warehouse that definitely looks haunted and assumed that this was the right place. We get out and grab our bags and start making our way to the side entrance that was supposed to be the way to get in. We round the corner, but there was no door or any way in. I asked Janie if this sounded right, and she said no, that her coworker said that there would be a door frame that's open with the door set to the side of it that had been busted off. We walked to the back of the building, and there was a door that was pried open. We ended up walking in just thinking maybe her coworker got that detail wrong. When we entered into this building, immediately I got hit with a wave of nausea, something I'd never experienced at that level of intensity. My sister stopped and turned around and told me that her head was hurting really bad, like she had a migraine. A few moments later, her headache and my nausea disappeared. It was really so strange how suddenly it came on and how quickly it went away for both of us. But we kept walking further into this building that seemed more and more like a maze at this point. This building was definitely abandoned and falling apart and had a very bad smell to it. It smelled like sulfur. Both of us knowing that that could be a sign of a demonic presence, we gave each other a look, and I said that we should be extremely careful with what we say as to not attract anything. The deeper we got into the warehouse, the darker it seemed to get. We had brought flashlights with us, so we took them out and started flashing them around, just checking the place out. My sister was in front of me, and she saw a door that was closed and said she wanted to check out what was in there. She tried to open the door, but the handle wouldn't move. She just assumed it was locked and kept moving. We see a different room with the door open, so we both walked in there. There was nothing in this room other than some old furniture that looked like it had been there for years. It was all turned over, looking like someone had gone in there and tried to break things. But while we were in that room, we heard what sounded like a door creaking open. When you think of a spooky place and a door opening and it makes that distinct creaking noise, that is exactly what we heard. Chills ran up my spine and my sister said, "That's our cue to leave." I was right behind her as we headed out of the room and back into the hallway. There was only one way out that we knew of, which was the same way we came in. We started heading back that way when we got back to the original door that we had tried to but couldn't open, and the door was wide open. My sister and I stopped in our tracks because we knew that door was closed earlier. I stepped in front of my sister to walk ahead of her and tried to walk as quietly as we could by that room. We then hear this pure evil laughter coming from inside that room. Something not of this world. You could tell whatever just did that was something evil and demonic. I immediately grab my sister's arm and start running to pass that room and get out of there as quickly as possible. As soon as I passed the room, I felt my arm jolt back and drop down. I turn around and see my sister on the ground being dragged into this room where that demonic laughter was coming from. I'm in chills right now. On my sister's leg, there was a long arm and fingers that were gripping her leg, pulling her into that room. I grabbed my sister's other hand and used all of my strength to pull her back toward me, away from that thing. I fell back with her in my hands because the thing had let her go. We jumped up and started running as fast as we could towards the door, but behind us, we could hear the loudest banging and running footsteps coming behind us. I know I shouldn't have, but I turned my head to look, and for a split second, I caught a glimpse of the thing that had tried to take my sister. A large black mass with long arms and fingers was flying towards us. And I don't mean flying like it was super fast. I mean levitating in midair, flying at us. But I could still hear banging all around us and footsteps chasing us. It truly was the most traumatizing thing I had ever seen. We make it out and into the car, flooring it out of there. The next few minutes were completely silent. I then start sobbing uncontrollably, and my sister did the same. We have no idea what this thing was, but we do know that it was demonic. Once we were almost home, my sister said she needed to tell me something. She told me that while that thing was dragging her into the room, she saw something else in there that was deeply disturbing. She told me that what was dragging her in there was the same exact thing that I saw flying at us. The large black mass with long arms and fingers, but she also said in the corner of that room, she saw another large black mass standing there, smiling at her. When we got home, we checked her leg, and as clear as day, there is a massive handprint on her leg where I saw the thing grabbing her. I would include a picture that we took, but my sister did not want that picture online. But the weirdest thing about this entire encounter is that my sister spoke to her coworker the next day and told her what had happened. While my sister was describing this place, her coworker said, "Are you sure you went to the right place?" She then showed my sister a picture of the place that she was talking about, and it looked nothing like the warehouse that we went to. The place we were supposed to go to didn't look like a traditional abandoned warehouse. It looked like it was still an operable business. Finding this out sent me into full-body chills, because to this day, my sister and I don't understand how we ended up there or what it was that we encountered. So I don't know about you guys, but I am also in full-body chills right now. Like I said, this is definitely one of the scariest stories that I've ever told. Because it's one thing when you hear or see something scary, but it's a whole other thing when that scary thing grabs onto you and tries to drag you into another room. Absolutely not. I 100% believe what they encountered was demonic entities. And all of the things that were happening leading up to getting to the warehouse, like your phones glitching and dying when they were at 100% battery, that's just weird. But then when you walk into the place, you get nausea and your sister gets a migraine. But what's even weirder to me is that at the very same time, it went away. That is so freaky. But the most absolutely gut-wrenching part of this story was when it grabbed your sister and was dragging her into that room. I just got chills. I don't know what it wanted with your sister, but I absolutely cross a line when something touches me. That is just a hard no from me. It's one thing to see it or hear it, but it's a whole other when it tries to touch you. But the description of what you said this thing looked like and your sister absolutely just sends chills down my spine every time I think about it. But the fact that one of them was in the corner of the room smiling at her, no, I can't. Ooh, I've got chills. But then when you get home, seeing that this thing left a handprint on your sister, absolutely not. No. But one of the creepiest parts to this story is your sister goes to work and tells her coworker about this, explains the place, and she's like, "I don't think you went to the right place." Shows her a picture, and it surely wasn't the same place. How y'all ended up there, I have no idea. I really, really would like to know, because that is absolutely frightening to just put in an address. You think you're going to the right place, and it takes you to a completely different place that's actually more haunted than you could even imagine. But Hannah, I am so sorry that you and your sister went through this. That is absolutely traumatizing, and I genuinely couldn't imagine going through something like this. So thank you for sending your story for us to be able to hear, but I'm so sorry y'all went through that. But that does conclude this episode of Tea After Midnight. If you have any personal scary stories you want to share, you know I would love to read it. You can email me at the email on the screen or the email in the caption of this video. But as always, you guys, thank you so much for being here. I love you so much. I hope you have the best night, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
26 minutes. That's exactly how long they were gone for, except it felt like 3 hours. I have a deep fascination with Glitch in the Matrix stories, and this one specifically has to do with Clinton Road, literally the most haunted road in all of America. This email was sent in last night, and the subject is, I don't think Clinton Road is haunted, I think something else is wrong with it. I'm not gonna pretend I have a clean and tidy explanation, I don't. I just have what I remember and what 2 other people remember differently, and a time gap that none of us can account for. I don't know if this counts as paranormal or something closer to what people call quote-unquote glitch in the Matrix on forums. Maybe it's neither. Maybe it's just a story about 3 people getting turned around on a dark road and building a story out of their own confusion, but I've never been able to shake it, and I don't think that I ever will. This happened October of 2021, a couple weeks before Halloween. My friends and I, for the purpose of the story, we're just gonna call them Daniel and Trevor, had heard about Clinton Road for years, the way everyone in that part of New Jersey eventually does. Depending on who you ask, it's the most haunted road in America. People will talk about the ghost sightings, the strange creatures in the woods, as well as this bridge where you're supposed to toss a coin off into the water below for a little ghost boy who is said to have drowned there. But most notoriously, this place has been known to be a dumping ground for some serial, as well as the mafia. We weren't expecting any of this to be real. Honestly, we just thought it'd be like a fun, creepy drive to do around Halloween. Something to talk to people about at parties. We got to the start of the road just after 9:30 p.m. At first, it felt exactly like you'd imagine. Pitch black, no streetlights, no houses, no other cars behind us or in front. My phone had shown full bars with them pulling up to that road, and within maybe 2 minutes, it dropped down to 1 bar, then to nothing. I remember joking with my friends that we were officially in the danger zone, and Trevor just telling me to shut up. Every so often, our headlights would catch something in the tree line, a reflection off an animal's eyes, most likely, but each time, the 3 of us would go quiet for a second before someone would make a joke to break the tension. When we finally reached the legendary bridge, I slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder. I remember reading about the ghost boy story on my phone earlier that day, and I actually wanted to do it, toss a coin in for him and see if he tosses it back. And I had an extra quarter in my cup holder. So I got out of the car, I walked to the edge of the bridge, leaned over the railing, and dropped the quarter into the water below. Trevor and Daniel were laughing when I got back into the car, calling it my ghost hole, telling me that I looked like an idiot standing out there in the dark talking to the river. I laughed along with them, but that is the last thing all 3 of us agree happened that night. A few minutes after we pulled back onto the road, my GPS gave up entirely. Not just no signal, but the little blue dot that shows up on Apple Maps was now showing up in a completely different position miles behind us. Wasn't able to access Spotify, so we went ahead and turned on the radio to fill the silence, flipping through static until we landed on one station that came in clearly, which felt strange in and of itself, given that we had no cell signal at all. The song that was playing was Come Back to Me by Vanessa Hudgens. We laughed because out of every song that could have come on in October of 2021, that felt completely random. Oh, I don't even remember the song. What is the song? I forgot about this song. Why? We all badly karaoke the rest of it, as you do with a song that you haven't heard in that many years, but somehow still remembered a lot of it. When the song ended, there was a short pause, maybe 2 seconds of dead air, and then the DJ's voice came back on and said, now here's Vanessa Hudgens with Come Back to Me. Rare aesthetic. You're going down Clinton Road and Vanessa Hudgens starts playing. I guess someone at the station really likes the song. And none of us really thought anything more of it in that moment. Like this had to have been a glitch or something that would have happened with old radio equipment on a station broadcasting in the literal middle of nowhere. It was around then that I glanced at the dashboard out of habit and read 10:47 p.m. I checked my phone to see how much longer we had until we reached the end of the road, and my phone said 10:53. Daniel checked his phone too, half out of curiosity, and he said 10:49. Trevor was actually wearing an old analog watch from his grandfather, and he glanced down and said that it was 10:45. We laughed for maybe like 30 seconds, making jokes about how none of our devices could agree on anything. It took a second for it to land that this actually didn't make any sense at all. Phones sync to cell towers or GPS satellites for their clocks. They don't just drift independently by minutes at a time. Daniel's phone and my phone were both iPhones, both the same carrier. There was no reason for them to disagree by 6 minutes. No one seemed to have an explanation, so what do you do at that age? You shrug it off. The deeper we drove, the eerier eerier everything felt. We turned down the music. It kind of felt like there was this weird energy pressing against the windows. I can't explain that. We passed an old mailbox on the right side of the road. It was a black metal mailbox with those reflective numbers on the side. I don't know how I saw this with how fast we were going, but they almost seemed to be peeling. Not long after that, we went past a bent guardrail, dented in a way that it looked like it had actually been hit at some point. And maybe a quarter mile past that, we saw a dead deer on the side of the road, half in the brush, and one leg was twisted in a way that made my stomach turn. We didn't say much about it. It was just background scenery on a dark, spooky road. But I kid you not, 20 minutes later, we passed that exact same mailbox. The same guardrail with the same dent, the same deer, and the same position with the same twisted leg, and the exact same order and what felt to be the exact same distance apart. Trevor said out of nowhere, "Do you think that we're actually lost?" Daniel sat up in the passenger seat and said, "Wait, didn't we already pass this?" I told him I thought so too. We spent maybe a minute trying to convince ourselves that Clinton Road probably just had multiple dead deer, multiple beat up guardrails, because that is a real possibility for a road like that. But it was the mailbox that convinced me otherwise. Trevor said again, "Do you think that we're actually lost?" And without even really thinking about it, I said, "You already asked me that." He turned around from the back seat and looked at me like I'd said something insane. He said, "No, I didn't." And then I got confused because maybe I didn't remember it clearly. The same question, the same tone, maybe a few minutes difference. I looked at Daniel for backup and he nodded slowly and said that he remembered that too. Trevor swore up and down that he never said those words in his life, and this was the first time that that thought had ever crossed his mind. Daniel and I just looked at each other, and for the first time of the night, neither of us said anything funny about this. Nobody was joking anymore after that. We drove for what felt like another 20 minutes in near silence, and all three of us were watching the road like we expected the mailbox to show up a third time. Eventually, without any of us really noticing the exact moment that it happened, my GPS signal came back on. The blue dot started moving again, and we finally found our way onto the main road again. And without any of us saying it aloud, we all agreed that we wanted to stop somewhere with lights and people before we did anything else. So we pulled over to the first gas station that we saw. It was one of those small, independent, non-mainstream gas stations. The cashier, who was an older guy, looked up when the bell over the door rang, and he smiled at us like he already knew us. "You guys find it this time?" I remember laughing a bit, assuming that he meant something about the directions in general, but he looked genuinely confused by the question. "You were just in here a couple hours ago." Daniel said, "What? You were in here just a couple hours ago filling up, asking how to get to Clinton Road." I told him he'd probably gotten us confused with someone else. He shook his head, slow and certain, no. He pointed out the window towards our car. Same car. He looked back at the three of us and one at a time like he was double checking. Same three people. None of us said anything. I paid for my bottle of water because I genuinely didn't know what else to do with my hands. And we left without any of us having a discussion about it in front of him. We also didn't say much when we got back into the car. I remember Daniel asking quietly, "That guy seemed freaked out to you or just confused?" Neither of us really answered him. Anyways, we left. Friends were dropped off. I got back home. My mom was still up, sitting in the living room. She asked why I'd forgotten my jacket. Apparently I had left without it. I told her we'd been out for almost 3 hours driving around Clinton Road and then just driving around afterwards to decompress. She looked at me strangely and said, "You've only been gone for 26 minutes. That felt like an obvious mistake on her end. I checked my phone. I had left the house around 9 p.m. and the clock was just turning 9:27. So 26 minutes. None of this made sense to me. I went back to my text with my mom. There was a text to my mom at 9:15 asking where my jacket was. It's almost as if I didn't even go to Clinton Road that night. I left to go get my friends, realized I didn't have my jacket, and then turned right back around. The only proof that I had is that the tank of gas I had gotten prior to this trip even happening was completely empty, as if we'd been driving around for hours instead of minutes. I kept telling myself for weeks after this that something was not adding up, and one night a few months later, the three of us were hanging out and the topic came up again. We were talking about Clinton Road and everything weird that we experienced following that night, and I made an offhanded joke, something like, "Well, at least I paid the ghost kid his toll," expecting a laugh because that's what we had all joked about that night, but neither of them knew what I was even talking about. I reminded them about pulling over to the bridge, getting out, the quarter in the cup holder and throwing it over. They both insisted, separately and firmly, that I had never gotten out of that car. According to the both of them, we slowed down near that bridge, looked at it for a few seconds, made a joke about the legend, and then kept driving. Neither of them remembered me opening the door. We proceeded to argue about this for almost an hour, but the details felt too specific for something that I had imagined. But still, according to the only other two people that were there, this never happened. I've never gone back to Clinton Road, and to this day, anytime that song comes on the radio, I change the station before it even starts, because a part of me is still afraid that I'm stuck in some sort of loop. I don't even know what to say about this submission. Like, I don't even know what to say. All that I want to say is that I'm genuinely curious about the experiences that he had on Clinton Road, and I kind of want to go see it for myself. So, we are at Clinton Road, the most haunted road in the entire United States. Dude, I'm scared.
You guys want to hear a scary story? Since you guys seem to love Bathsheba from my last stories, I have another one for you. For quick context, I used to babysit for a house that was extremely haunted when I was in high school. 2 daughters, the oldest one I called Luna, the youngest one I called Aura, code names to protect their identity. And Luna had an imaginary friend named Pete that was actually not imaginary and was a demonic entity living in the home and feeding off of me and the kids. There were multiple entities, doesn't end there. There was also another one called Bathsheba because she strongly resembles Bathsheba from The Conjuring. This started happening to me like 2 years before that movie came out. And I remember I saw the movie and I was like, oh my god, I've seen her before. So to get you caught up, there we are. This happened to me my senior year. I remember I was babysitting and I wasn't supposed to work, so I was really stressed. They needed me last minute, and I had already, this is on a Friday, so I had already gone to my, I had gone to school, and then I got out early. I went to my first job. I was a nail salon receptionist, and then I was home for like 20 minutes before I get this call. I was supposed to go to a high school party, so I remember I did not want to work, but I never said no to money, and I was close with the family, so I just basically told her, yeah, I just can't stay like overnight or late today. And she's like, no, that's fine. I only need you until 8:30. So I was like, perfect. Extra money for the weekend, you know? And I had the next day off. I remember that's why I was so excited, because I worked so much when I was a teenager that I was excited to go to a party and, you know, just be able to have fun and not have to wake up for work the next day. So I remember I packed a bag, like my makeup, and then I threw in like a bunch of random outfits, probably crop tops and bandeaus, like that's what we used to wear in 2014, 2013, like jean shorts, stuff like that. Threw it in a bag and I headed over. The energy of the house is weird when I get there because mom's stressed out of her mind. I forget what she had to go do, but she wasn't working. She just had to go do something really important, and it was so chaotic. The girls weren't in the best mood. Like everything was just seemed very volatile and a lot of turmoil. It's kind of what the energy felt like just stress. Rushing her out of the house, I'm like, oh, I got it, it's fine, you know. And then the girls were playing, everything is going well. I think we're doing a board game, no scares, no, nothing like that, thank God. What's the cardinal rule? If you think it's going too well, it probably isn't. Something's gonna end up happening. So we were playing this board game or whatever we were doing in the living room. And then I remember I told them, I'm like, okay, girls, like, I'm gonna go get dressed really quick. Are you okay to, you know, be alone, play this alone for a minute? And they were like, yeah. So I went into their parents' bedroom because they had a big bathroom in there with a lot of mirrors. And I was trying to plan my outfit together. So I shut the bathroom door, obviously, when I'm changing, but I left the bedroom door open so they could come knock if they needed me. And I literally planned on being like 2-3 minutes in there. I'm in there for maybe 30 seconds. I had just thrown on like my pants, and I think I had like a bandeau top on. And I hear at the bathroom door. And I'm like, yes, like Luna, Aura. I don't hear them. I'm like, And I'm like, yeah. Because I'd look back, I'm 16, 17 at the time. I'm annoyed, right? Like, I just walked out of the room, but it's silent. And I'm like, I must be hearing things. Because if the girls ever needed me or something, you know, if I'm like, what do you need? They'll reply. They're not just going to sit there in silence. So I go to grab a shirt, and then again, right when I turn my back, I'm annoyed. I throw the door open because I'm decent, you know. But the girls aren't there, and so immediately I'm like, great, I know where this is heading. I'm thinking at this point it's Pete. Remember the entity I talked about in the beginning, the imaginary friend? He was the dominant entity in that home that was always doing things. Scaring me, scaring the girls, moving things like you would see him. He was very strong, and so in my head, I don't think I'm about to see Bathsheba. I'm not prepared for it, because she was more of a rare occasion, and I didn't see her as much as I saw Pete. And sometimes, as silly as it sounds, I would get annoyed with Pete because the paranormal encounters happen so often that you start getting annoyed after a while. Like, you just want to be left alone. I'm a little unsettled, but I'm like, okay, you know. And I'm looking around the room one more time, and I shut the door because I'm still, you know, going to change in and out of outfits. I was looking for a very specific brown crop top bandeau when I went back to change again, because I had just seen it. Like, before I went to open the door, when I heard the knocking, I was planning on trying that on next. I turned back around and that top is gone. I don't know where it is, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I feel like I'm gonna cry because I'm just stressed, I'm overworked. Like, I just wanted this top. So I'm dumping the whole bag out at this point. I'm looking at the counter and I just want to cry. Like, so annoyed. I accept defeat. I'm like, you know what? I probably misplaced it. I'll find it somewhere, but I have to get back out there, check on the girls, and like, maybe it'll just turn up somewhere, you know? So I put on, I don't remember what top it was, to be honest, a different top. And I'm looking at all these mirrors, these big mirrors in the bathroom, and I felt confident. I remember I was like, wow, like, I look cute. Like, I like it. I don't need the brown top. I like this one. I'm trying to hype myself up, you know? And the way their mirrors were angled was like, it was the whole wall, and then like the side wall, so you could see yourself through a lot of different angles. So I was looking at myself in like the side, like the one closest to the closet, if that makes any sense, and I could see like to my left on my peripheral vision, like the other angle of me. And I turned to look at like my left again, and I see something in my peripheral vision this time in the side, like the mirror in front of me. That's the side of the closet. And I look back and I see none other than Bathsheba. She's standing behind me, closest to the door, to the bathroom door. She had a crooked smile on her face. Her neck was kinked all the way in a 90-degree angle. Smile that went up to here, damn near her eyes. The raspiest, most vile tone. She says, "I like it." Like I had just said to myself. I had just looked in the mirror and been like, "I like it. Like, I like this. I look cute." I think she was mimicking me. And as she's standing there, I realize she is holding my brown top. Now I turn around instead of looking at her through the mirror at this point, and the top, she's gone. I don't see her when I turn around, but the top is floating in the fucking middle of the air. I shit you not. Everything that I love, top is in the middle of the air, collapses. The top just falls. I'm like reliving this as I'm telling it. Oh my god. I sat there for a good minute. Didn't know what to do, didn't know how to react, didn't know how to move, and just started to cry. I just started to cry. It was such a quick but real terrifying experience. I felt so nasty that she had like her hands on my shirt, right? And it was one of those crazy paranormal moments too, where you literally see the item fall in the air, like you're not crazy. And so I remember, I love that brown top, that's all I've been talking about. I threw it away. I didn't even want any trace of her on my things. I walked out and I was super unsettled. I was crying, like I said. And the girl's like, "Riley, are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just, having a long week, guys. Just adult stuff." And the mom came home and I had never left so fast. I had never left so fast. I could barely enjoy my pregame I was having with my friends. Because I was literally so tweaked out still, and I think also from a lack of sleep. Like I said, in high school, I'm partying, I'm working all the time, like everything just kind of hit me. I ended up, this party I was so excited to go to, I ended up leaving like 2 hours after I got there because I was just so unsettled from this situation, and I honestly thought I was going crazy a little bit. But that's all for now. Someone knocks on the door and you go to answer it and no one's there, be very mindful that someone probably walked through the door when you opened it, but you just didn't get to see it on time. Bye.
When I first listened to the story in Spanish, I thought it was gonna have like a wholesome ending, but then it kept going and going and going, and I was like, what the fuck is this? This story is coming from Relatos de la Noche, and if you want to listen to it in Spanish, because it is gonna be so much more scarier, it is a video titled Un duende visita a mi bebé todas las noches, but it's not one story, it's like a compilation of stories with duendes. The story that I'm about to translate is one of the many in that compilation video, and it is gonna be a little bit long. I know you've been wanting longer videos, so sit back, relax, grab a snack, and hide your feet in your blankets because this shit is scary. So this lady's name is Claudia, and she says that she has had a lot of paranormal experiences throughout her life, but the story that she's about to share is one of the stories that has scared her so much, and it has to do with her daughter. This happened 8 years ago when they were still living in Mexico City. Claudia says that when she first had her daughter, the first 4 months were really normal. Her daughter didn't really cry that much. She was a really good baby. So it was her husband, and of course her 4-month-old baby, and there was one night where they were all getting ready to go to bed when out of nowhere they hear her daughter crying really bad. She explains that the baby cry wasn't like her normal, like I'm hungry or like change my diaper type of cry. It was almost as if somebody hit the baby really hard and the baby started crying with a lot of feeling. They immediately run to the baby. They look all around her body. Nothing was wrong. She even tried breastfeeding the baby and nothing could calm her down. She remembers looking at the time and it was a little bit after midnight, and that is when the baby finally calmed down. She went to bed. It was almost as if nothing had happened. She never thought it was something paranormal. She just thought that maybe her baby had like pain somewhere. She started crying and then it stopped. However, this would continue on night after night after night. Around the same time, her baby would start crying really bad, and then a little bit past midnight, she would stop crying, go to sleep like if nothing ever happened. They also thought that maybe like an animal or something had bitten her and they had no idea, so that's why they checked her body and they never found anything. And of course, being that this was an every night thing, they ended up taking her to the doctor where they did some studies, they checked her, and they told her that the baby was healthy. There was nothing wrong with her. However, even though the daughter was healthy, days would pass, months would pass, and this would happen regularly every single night. So the baby at this point was 10 months old, and they were having like this family reunion. One of her husband's uncles gets there with their aunt, who is in a wheelchair, and she's an elderly woman. She notices how this old lady wouldn't stop staring at her baby, and it got to the point where it even made her very uncomfortable. She didn't tell anybody that it was making her uncomfortable, and that was also when the uncle's aunt came up to them and said that their elderly aunt wanted to meet the baby. That was a moment when she calmed down, because she thought to herself, how dumb am I feeling uncomfortable when obviously the elderly lady was just looking at my baby because she wanted to meet her and carry her. So of course she agreed, and she went over to the lady that was in the wheelchair so that she can see her baby. As this elderly lady was holding on to the baby, she asked her to come a little bit closer, and Claudia does. And she notices how her baby is just staring at this old lady like if she knew her, like she was comfortable with her. And that is when the old lady tells her that her baby is special, that she is an old soul. The elderly lady ends up telling Claudia that her baby and her knew each other in a past life and that they were best friends. When this elderly woman says this, she says that the baby started laughing and smiling, and that left her really confused. Claudia didn't know what to tell the elderly lady, so she was just smiling and kind of going along with what she was saying without giving it importance. However, what the lady says next left her feeling chills all over her body. Your baby cries every night, right? She felt really scared because she knew that she hadn't told anybody what was happening other than her husband and the doctor, and she knows that her husband's not the type to go around talking about personal things like this. She also didn't even tell her own family this, so this wasn't something that this elderly woman should know. She said that all she could do was nod yes to the lady, and that's when the lady told her something that she knows that when people hear this might be a joke to you, but the second that the lady said this, she knew that this could be true and maybe this is what was happening to her daughter. The elderly lady tells her she has a chaneque. Every night that chaneque hits her and does things to her really bad and makes her cry. I saw him the second that I entered your house and saw your baby. Now, if you don't know what a chaneque is, it's similar to a duende. I googled it, okay, because I'm familiar with duendes but not chaneques so much. It says a chaneque is a mythical spirit-like creature in Mexican folklore. Originating from Nahuatl, the term chaneque roughly translates to those who inhabit dangerous or sacred places or owners of the house. They are widely regarded as mischievous guardians of nature and the underworld. In broader Spanish-speaking cultures, they are often referred to as duendes, goblins, or fairies. Now back to the story. The lady continues to tell her that this chaneque hides in between the baby's blanket, and at nighttime it gathers the force it needs to like hurt the baby, and that's why this was happening. And as the lady is telling this to Claudia, Claudia's face is basically confirming to the lady that yeah, she believes everything she's telling her, and the elderly lady says that she can help her get rid of the chaneque. This elderly lady started whispering to her baby, and Claudia says that she doesn't understand what language she was speaking in, but she was saying a whole bunch of words and that her baby was just laughing and laughing. After a little bit, the elderly lady finally tells Claudia that she got rid of that chaneque, and by that point her baby had fallen asleep. She tells Claudia that the baby would not be doing this at nighttime anymore, and Claudia notices how this elderly lady looked really tired. It was so bad that she actually told them to take her home because she needed to get some rest. Claudia honestly stayed in shock, and she was even more shocked that night when she was ready to go to bed, ready for her daughter to start crying and all that. And when the time came, her baby didn't cry anymore. She didn't do the same routine she had been doing every single night. She was calm, she was asleep, and she slept the whole night. She honestly couldn't believe it, but she was so happy that this routine, this like nightmare that had been going through was finally over. Her baby was no longer suffering, at least not with that. Anyway, you think it's over? It is not over. I told you this shit gets worse. I told you I thought this was gonna be a wholesome story and this is how it was gonna end. No, just wait. Everything had calmed down for a very long time actually. Everything was good until the baby turned 2 years old. So by this point, they were living in her husband's parents' home. The parents were no longer living in that house. They moved to the US and they needed more space because she was pregnant with baby number 2. By this point, the 2-year-old was already ready to have her own bedroom and she was gonna sleep by herself. The second night that she was gonna spend alone in her bedroom, it happened again. She started crying in the middle of the night like if she was hurt or in pain. Around the same time that she had done this when she was a baby. The husband was the first one to get up and run into the little girl's room. Because he was in such a rush and he knew that she was on the bed crying, he didn't even bother turning on the light. But when he was looking for her, he couldn't feel her anywhere on the bed. Claudia comes from behind him. Obviously, she turns on the light. After turning the lights on, they see that she is next to her bathroom door. Now, here is the weird and really fucked up part of this whole scenario. Claudia says that she had the habit of always wrapping her daughter up like a burrito when it was time to go to sleep. And that is exactly how she was right next to the door. She was wrapped up like a little burrito. It was impossible for her, let's just say, to even fall out of the bed, get up and walk toward the bedroom door and still maintain intact as like a little burrito just wrapped around. The only way this would have been possible is if someone had grabbed her and just put her in front of that restroom door, because she shouldn't be still wrapped up like a burrito if she had fallen or walked out of bed. She says that her husband noticed the exact same thing, because in that very moment, he literally dropped to his knees and started praying in front of the daughter. In the middle of the dad praying, out of nowhere, this frame that was above their daughter's bed just randomly fell to the ground. She starts freaking out because they had just installed that frame. Like, that frame was really secured over the bed and they knew that nobody had touched it, or there's no reason for it to have fallen like that. They still went over, checked to see if that nail was on the wall. They just wanted to have like a realistic explanation, because in that moment they were terrified of what they were experiencing. The nail was still on the wall. There's no reason why this frame should have fallen, and they couldn't find an explanation. After that night, they did not feel comfortable leaving their daughter alone in that bedroom, so they brought her with them to their bedroom to go to sleep. However, after a few months, they had the second baby. They had the daughter go back to her bedroom. She spent the night and everything went normal. They thought that maybe that incident was a one-timer and everything stayed in the past. Now, after a few nights of their 2-year-old sleeping in her bedroom, they realized, oh my gosh, my friend told me that their kids did this, and I'm sure you guys are all parents too. So the 2-year-old would now come into their bedroom and she would stand over her dad, just staring at him without saying anything. One of my best friends, which is crazy because her name is also Claudia, she would tell me that one of her kids would do the same thing, that they would just stand there looking at her without even saying anything, and it's almost like that presence that like of them looking at you that would wake her up, and she'd be so freaked out. I wouldn't know what the fuck to do. That's scary. Like, even if it's not paranormal, that's fucking scary. Like, what are you doing watching me sleep? And the fact that you wake up to that like stare from them. Anyway, hopefully my friend Claudia would not have to deal with what this Claudia is about to have to deal with. So the dad would basically wake up from deep sleep because he almost felt those eyes of his daughter on him, and as soon as he would open his eyes, he would see the daughter's silhouette just run out of their bedroom. When he would get up after seeing her like run out of the bedroom, he would obviously go and check on her, see if everything was okay, what she was doing, and he would find her on her bed fully asleep. I have chills. What the fuck? He would go as far as to like shake her to see if she was faking it, but he says that she would wake up almost as if she was never awake, like she was never in the bedroom, and that was like so freaky for them. At that point, obviously they're trying to find a realistic explanation, you know, not a paranormal one, so they thought to themselves that maybe she was a sleepwalker, which honestly, yeah, that would make a lot of sense, or a sleep runner, because that bitch was out of there as soon as he woke up. Now, they did think that maybe she was sleepwalking. However, there were some occasions that would make them think, no, the fuck, she was not sleepwalking. And there was one time where they woke up out of dead sleep because they can hear her talking and laughing. When they got up to go to her room, they literally see her sitting on her bed towards the wall with the lights completely off. They immediately turned the lights on. Fuck yeah, because what the fuck are we all gonna do in fucking darkness at seeing this girl laughing, facing the wall? They turn the lights on. She, the little girl, immediately just like lays back on her bed, and the dad's like, what are you doing? Because obviously she is not sleepwalking, she is fully awake. The little girl just responded that she was playing, and the parents are like, with who? If that wouldn't be me, I would not be asking who you're playing with. I would be like, oh, okay, cool, bye. I'm leaving that house. I'm abandoning you. No, but for real, like, I would not have follow-up questions. That's already scary enough. But anywho, they asked her who she was playing with, and that is when she kind of lowered her eyes, like she was not looking at them anymore, and you can tell that she didn't even want to answer that question. Their daughter didn't answer that question. She looked down and refused to tell them anything. But honestly, Claudia said that at that point they were so scared, they didn't know what to do. They also didn't know how to help her. The only thing that they knew what to do or how to do was to pray, and they would pray for a really long time until things would calm down, and basically wait until things would start up again so that they can pray again. So fast forward, and their daughter is now 4 years old, and she explains that that's when they decided to get Netflix, and the only TV they had was in the living room, so her and her husband would usually stay up watching different series, and sometimes they would accidentally fall asleep on the couch. And of course, it was around that time where things started to get crazy again. Now their daughter's 4, and she would go to where they were sleeping, stand above her dad, and just watch him sleep. By this point, the dad was almost like, I know she's here. I know she's watching me. I don't want to open my eyes. So there was a night, they had been watching Netflix, they fell asleep on the couch, and he knew. He woke up because of that presence of his daughter looking at him. But this time he's like, I'm gonna open my eyes. And he does. He opens his eyes, and he says that this time the daughter didn't run away. She was there. She just stared back at him. And then she gets close to his face and says, I hate you. She turns around to run. Not the same run like when she was 2 years old. No, she goes on all fours, and on all fours she climbs the stairs to go up to her bedroom. I hope you don't imagine these in your head like a fucking movie, because what the fuck. She explains that when she said like the I hate you, she woke up and she was able to see her climb the stairs on all fours. It wasn't just like the dad awake. They both witnessed their daughter, I was gonna say this bitch. They witnessed their daughter run up the stairs on all fours like an animal. Both very much scared as fuck, still decided to run after her up the stairs. Again, could it be me? Maybe I don't have kids. I don't know if that would be me. Maybe you go. You dad. She was on top of you, not on top of me. She said she hated you, not me. You go. By this point, it wasn't just her in that bedroom. It was the baby as well. And they decided not to let them sleep alone in that bedroom anymore. Claudia actually decided to lock that bedroom. She didn't want anybody going in and out of there, because by that point, she just felt that maybe it was the bedroom where like everything was happening or something was wrong in there. She thought that maybe if they closed that door, nothing that was in there could come out. It should have kept your daughter locked in there, because I'm sorry. I feel like, am I the only one that gets super scared when it comes to like children? Like in horror movies, like when things happen to little kids or like they're all like possessed and shit. Oh, I cannot. Little kid things, it's like so freaky to me. So by this point, they were all asleep in the living room, and she was awoken because she heard her husband talking to the 4-year-old daughter. When she gets up and looks at what is going on, she sees that their 4-year-old daughter is on all fours at the base of the stairs, like almost like she's about to go up there. The husband was asking their daughter, where are you going? And that the daughter was just repeating, my mom's calling me. My mom says that she's cold. And that's when the husband, her dad was like, no, your mom's right behind me. Look, your mom's right here. She immediately gets up and she's like, no, I'm right here. I'm your mom. I'm not cold. I'm not up there. I'm right here. Come to me. That little girl did not care. She started running again up the stairs on all fours, and the dad started running after her. He ended up catching her right before she entered the bedroom. This is the moment that they knew that they needed help. They needed to do something. Like things were just getting out of hand. It was September 19 of 2017. They were at home, and that is when the earthquake hit Mexico. Claudia and her husband got the kids, got them out of the house, but their 4-year-old wanted to go back in there. They were literally holding their daughter back, and the little girl was screaming, my mom's inside, my mom. The dad was literally screaming at the girl, getting her out of the house, saying, your mom's not in there, look, turn around, your mom's outside. But it was almost like the little girl wasn't understanding because she was crying, and at this point looking upstairs stares at the window saying, my mom, my mom. The little girl was screaming, my mom's calling me, my mom's calling me. And that's when Claudia grabs her by the shoulders, turns her around and say, I am right here. I am your mom and I am outside. I am not inside. That's finally when the daughter just held onto her, hugged her, and started crying. And Claudia just remembers being so scared. Like, first of all, there was an earthquake, but the fact that that was a reaction of their daughter. They were both very terrified at what was happening to their daughter, and that was finally the moment where her husband decided to call his parents that lived in the US and started explaining everything that was happening with the daughter. His parents were attending this Christian church at the time, and the parents actually decided to talk to the priest of the church about everything that was happening. The priest ended up telling them that they needed to do these very specific prayers in order to help the daughter. They really wanted to try it. They had all the faith in the world that this could help their daughter. Not too far after this happening, Claudia says that she was taking pictures of her daughters that she always did, and in one of the pictures she noticed that there was something behind her 4-year-old daughter and that this being had 2 horns. Immediately she sends this picture to her mother-in-law, and the mother-in-law showed the picture to the priest at church. And no, we don't have the picture. I already know you guys are gonna ask, show the picture or it's not real. I don't have the picture, and also I wouldn't want to fucking see that picture. What the fuck? The priest tells them that there is something that is trying to overpower their daughter. The priest ends up sending them links of these like prayers that they have to do, and what really scared her and her husband was that some of the narrations, like the words that were in these prayers, had the word exorcism in them. They explained to them that they had to do this prayer at a very specific time at night. They had to do this with a lot of faith because that is the only way they can get this thing away from the daughter. So the priest from the United States actually ends up FaceTiming them while they were doing this because he was also gonna help them. They started everything. They followed every single direction that was given to them, and they started this when the daughter was in the room asleep. She remembers that her husband was on one side, she was on the other. They held hands, and with the pastor they started following the prayers and everything that they were supposed to do. Their daughter started moving very weirdly, and what happened next, she says that she knows that maybe some people are not going to believe it, but she would never play around or pretend that something like this happened to their children. So what she's about to say is something that she witnessed with her own eyes. They were still doing their prayer, and that is when the priest on the FaceTime call started telling whatever was there to leave their daughter, to leave the daughter alone, and whatever was there tormenting her was not allowed to be there, and they had to leave. Bitch, I have chills. I forgot this happened. The story's so long, okay? The little girl, both of her fists, starts punching her ears and screaming in Spanish, cállate, 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 which means shut up, shut up, shut up. Oh my god, I'm scared. Oh my gosh, I'm scared. Oh my god, I'm scared. No, I'm not scared. I'm not scared. That's also when she started kicking, and they explained that they were at this point holding her legs down, but the force that this little girl had, it was too much for it to be a 4-year-old girl. Like, she was extremely strong in that moment. That's also when the priest was directing them to get the holy water and to form a cross on the little girl's forehead. It was in that moment when their daughter just started laughing when they were doing that cross on her forehead with the holy water. And Claudia's like, listen, I have seen this shit in scary movies. It is a completely different thing when it's happening to you and your daughter in real time. It is crazy. Seeing something like that, like the laughter, like her saying like shut up and hurting herself. It is a completely different thing when it's happening to somebody that you love and that you're close to. After this, she says that her daughter starts screaming so loud, and then out of nowhere it was almost like she hit the bed, calmed down a lot, and then she started crying like with a lot of sentiment and feeling. She explains like just retelling the story and remembering this moment is making her want to cry, like the fact that they had to go through all of that, but the fact that her daughter had to live through this as well. After all of this, she explains that their daughter went back to normal. She became the nice and loving daughter that they always knew, and they went as far as to move the fuck out of that house. All of this has remained just like really bad memories, and they still don't understand why that could have happened to their daughter. They still don't understand if this could have anything to do with the chaneque that would like visit her when she was a baby, or what the fuck was up with like the mom that she would claim to see in that house when she was around 4 years old. They will never understand, but they're very much thankful that it's over and nothing has happened ever since. Obviously now their daughter is a teenager, and thankfully nothing has happened after everything, and it's been years. Whew. But what do you guys think?
Have you ever broken a family superstition and immediately known you shouldn't have? Well, that's exactly what happened in tonight's scary story. So grab a blanket, maybe a snack, and get settled in for tonight's Midnight Confessions Stories from the Dark. When I was a kid, my dad's parents had a house in the country with a lake on their property. While I was growing up, my brother, my parents, and I went out there all the time. We were allowed to swim in the lake. But there was one rule my parents and grandparents always repeated: never call out someone's name near the water. If you needed someone, you walked over to them. If you were on the dock and someone was farther out, you would wave and yell something generic like, "Hey," or "Everyone out of the water." I never questioned it when I was younger, but around 15 or 16, I realized this wasn't normal. And I asked my dad where it came from. He told me it was an old superstition that saying someone's name out loud near the water could wake something up. About a year later, I was out on the water with my younger brother just before sunset. We had taken out an old rowboat and drifted farther out from the dock than we usually did. At one point, my brother realized he'd left his phone at the house. He asked if we should head back, but I didn't want to go inside yet because I knew my mom wouldn't let us back out if we did. So I told him I'd just ask our cousin to bring it. The house wasn't that far, and we could still see him sitting on the porch in a rocking chair. My brother immediately reminded me that we weren't supposed to do that. I brushed him off and just called out our cousin's name. He didn't respond, so I called it again. Still nothing. My brother grew impatient and started rowing us back toward the dock. I was making fun of how bad he was at rowing when something unseen hit the side of the boat. At the same time, I heard my cousin's name called out again in my voice. The sound came from behind us. Too much time had passed for it to be an echo, and it hadn't come from the right direction. I looked toward the house. Our cousin was still sitting on the porch, but now he was facing us, his body completely still. We started waving at him to get his attention without saying his name again, but he didn't wave back. His lips moved as if he were speaking, but we couldn't hear what he was saying. I called out asking if he could hear us and to bring my brother's phone. He didn't respond, but his lips kept moving. Once we reached the dock, we secured the boat and headed toward the house. The closer we got, the more uneasy I felt. Goosebumps spread across my arms, and my intuition was telling me to run. Finally, we were close enough to the house to see our cousin's face. His lips were still moving soundlessly, but his face looked like his, but it had a waxy appearance that I'd never seen on a human before. I was about to ask him if he was feeling okay, but before I could say anything, my brother yelled for our dad. Almost instantly, we heard our dad's voice in response, but it didn't come from the house. It came from the woods behind the house. Confused, my brother called out again. This time, the voice said, "It's me. Come closer." My instincts took over. I grabbed my brother's arm and pulled him back toward the house as fast as I could. We ran inside and saw that everyone was there. My mom, my dad, my grandparents, and our cousin, fast asleep on the couch. I guess some superstitions exist for a reason. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think there was a logical explanation for what happened? Or do you think superstitions might actually be rooted in real events? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to follow for more Midnight Confessions.
I found a soaking wet child's raincoat outside of my house during a week where it didn't even rain once. This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about why my neighbor panicked when she saw me trying to carry it inside. I noticed it when I came home from work. It was a little yellow raincoat, the kind made for a young kid, hanging over the railing beside my front door, and it was completely soaked. Water was dripping from the sleeves and forming a puddle on the porch beneath it. That would have been strange enough on its own, but we hadn't had rain in over a week. It was the middle of the summer, and the sidewalks were dry, the grass was turning brown, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. I looked around to see if there were any children outside, but the street was empty. I had moved into the house less than a month earlier, so I didn't know most of the neighbors yet. I figured a kid had left it there by mistake, or maybe one of the parents had put it on the wrong porch. I picked it up, and the fabric was ice cold.
Not cold from being wet, but cold enough that my fingers started hurting while I held it. I carried it inside and hung it over the back of a kitchen chair so it could dry. I checked the pockets for a name, but there was nothing inside except water. A lot of water. Maybe more than should have been trapped inside a raincoat. When I turned one of the pockets inside out, it poured out onto the floor like someone had filled it from a faucet. The water smelled strange too. It reminded me of a lake. Mud and plants and that stale smell water gets when it has been sitting somewhere without moving. I cleaned up the floor and left the coat hanging in the kitchen. Maybe 10 minutes later, someone started pounding on my front door. It was the older woman who lived across the street. I had spoken to her once when I moved in, but I didn't even know her name yet. She was looking past me into the house. The second she saw the yellow coat hanging over the chair, her face changed. She asked where I found it, and I told her it was on my porch. And she said, "Why did you bring it inside?" She sounded genuinely scared, and I told her I was trying to find out who it belonged to. She stepped backward and told me I needed to put it outside immediately. I asked if she recognized it, and she wouldn't answer. She just kept saying, "Put it back where you found it before it gets dark." I thought she was being dramatic, but something about the way she was looking at the coat made me listen. I carried it back outside and laid it over the porch railing. The woman stayed in my yard until I was finished, and before she left she told me not to touch it again. I asked why, and she looked towards the coat and then said, "It shows up every few years." And that was all that she would tell me. I watched her walk back across the street and lock her front door behind her. By then I was completely creeped out. I considered throwing the coat away, but she had been so specific about leaving it where it was that I decided not to. I locked my doors too and kept checking the porch through the front door. The coat stayed there until it got dark, and around 11 I went upstairs to bed. I could still see part of the porch from my bedroom window. The coat was hanging exactly where I left it. I closed the curtains and tried to sleep. Sometime later, I woke up to water dripping. It was loud enough that I thought a pipe had burst. I turned on my bedroom light and checked the bathroom. The sink was dry and the tub was dry. I walked into the hallway, and that was when I saw the water. There were small wet spots on the floor. It wasn't puddles, they looked like footprints. Bare feet and child-sized. They started at the top of the stairs and led toward my laundry room. I followed them. The yellow raincoat was hanging from the laundry room doorknob, and it was still dripping. I stood there staring at it, trying to understand how it had gotten back inside. And the doors were locked, the windows were closed, the front porch was empty. I didn't want to touch it again, but I also didn't want it inside my house. I used a broom handle to lift it off the doorknob and carried it downstairs without putting my hands on it. I placed it back on the porch and locked the door. And then I pushed a chair under the doorknob. I wanted to call the neighbor across the street, but I didn't have her number. I thought about walking over, but I was too afraid to leave the house. I went back upstairs and sat on my bed with the light on. Maybe 20 minutes later, I heard the dripping again. And this time it was directly outside my bedroom. I looked under the door, and water was slowly spreading across the floor from the hallway. I didn't open it, and then something brushed against the other side of the door. The handle moved slightly, not enough to open, just a small turn, like someone had put their hand on it and was testing it. And then I heard a child's voice, a little boy. He sounded cold and tired, and he whispered, "Can you help me?" I didn't answer. The handle moved again, and then he said, "I can't get it off." I sat there holding my breath, and the voice came from low to the ground like the child was standing right on the other side of the door. He asked again, "Can you help me take it off?" I stayed in the room until sunrise. I never heard him walk away, and the dripping eventually stopped and everything became quiet. When it was fully light outside, I opened the bedroom door. The yellow coat was laying in the hallway. The floor underneath it was soaked, and I left the house without touching it and went straight across the street. The older woman opened her door before I even knocked. I told her what the child had said, and she looked toward my house but wouldn't go inside with me. She only told me to leave the coat alone until it disappeared. When I checked again that morning, it was gone. The floor was still wet, but there was nothing there. I never saw the child, and I never found out where the raincoat came from. My neighbor still refuses to explain what she knows about it. I just know that if it ever appears on my porch again, I'm not bringing it inside this time. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
We got a new spooky scary storytime submission from a long-haul truck driver named Daryl who shared the creepiest experience he ever had while picking up a hitchhiker or a woman on the side of the road. And he says he's not even sure if the woman that he picked up was entirely human. Now, Daryl says that most trucking companies have very strict policies when it comes to picking up hitchhikers. You are just not allowed to do it. But because he owns his own rig, it's his truck and his rules. That said, he still doesn't really do it because of the risks involved, the liabilities, and the crazy stories he's heard from other truck drivers. In October of 2017, he said he made an exception to his rule because he was driving at about 2 o'clock in the morning through a dark rural stretch of northern Montana. It had been raining for hours and there were barely any other cars on the road, and his GPS had already lost signal twice. So he glanced down for about 2 seconds to reset his route, and when he glanced back up, he slammed on the brakes because there was a woman standing on the side of the road and he almost barreled into her. She wasn't walking, she was just standing there, but she was standing so close on the edge of the shoulder that she was almost in the road, and she looked to be soaking wet. She was wearing a cream-colored dress and a dark-colored sweater. Beside her was a baby stroller. It was like an old-fashioned one with the deep bassinet and the large wheels. And he said when he saw her, he braked so hard that he nearly jackknifed his truck. As he came to a screeching halt, the woman didn't even react. She just slowly turned her head to look at him. Daryl says the baby stroller was the main reason he stopped. He assumed there was a child inside, and he assumed that the woman had broken down somewhere and was now stuck, stranded, and walking with her child in the rain. Said he stopped a few yards ahead of her and rolled down his passenger window. He didn't get out, and he waited for her to walk with the stroller and approach his truck. And when she did, he asked if she needed help. When he asked her through the open window, it actually didn't even seem like she heard him at first because she just stared at him, and he noticed that she was probably in her mid to late 20s and she was very pretty. While he waited for her to answer, he glanced at the baby carriage and he expected to see a little blanket or maybe hear a baby cry, but it was too dark. But finally, the woman speaks up and she says, "May we travel with you?" And Daryl's like, "Yeah, of course." And he opens the door or unlocks the truck and she climbs in. But as she does, she folds up the baby stroller, and that's when he realizes that there's no baby inside. It's empty. He said that the way that she asked, "May we travel with you?" also unsettled him because it didn't sound like the way that normal people talk. It sounded too formal, like she was trying to imitate what being a person sounded like. So she climbs in and he says, "What city are you headed to?" And she says, "I'll know when we get there." And that also bothered him. And as she said it, she kind of kept glancing down at the baby carriage. And so he asked, like, "Were you traveling with a child at some point?" And she says, "A what?" And he says, "A child." And she says, "Oh, I forgot." And he's like, "How do you forget if you're traveling with a child?" So at this point, he's assuming that she's struggling with a mental illness or that she possibly has dementia. He doesn't really know what's going on, but she's already in the cab. She's already soaking wet. And he's trying to figure out, like, what do I do at this point? Because he doesn't want to throw her back out on the side of the road in the middle of the night. She also had a small frame, and so he's thinking, like, she's probably harmless. Hopefully she just tells me where she wants to go. So they start driving and she's sitting very rigid and just facing straight ahead, looking through the windshield. And finally she points and she says, "How long have your kind traveled this path?" And he's like, "The road? I don't know, maybe like 100 years, I would guess this has been a trucking route, give or take." And he said he didn't know. He was just sort of like making conversation. And she says, "No, the path beneath it, the path through the dark." And he said he had no idea what she was talking about. And so he just gets quiet again and didn't really know what to say or how to take what she was saying. So he's like, "Do you mean the highway?" And she just got quiet again and stared through the windshield. And finally, after a few seconds, she says, "You paved over so many of them." And as she said this, he said he felt this chill run through him because he just realized that he was not having a normal conversation. And before he could answer, she turns toward him and she says, "What is a city?" He thought maybe he misheard her. So he's like, "A city, like where a lot of people live?" And she said, "Why?" And he said, "Because people need jobs and there's schools there, and it's just where a lot of people live close together." And keep in mind, he's still thinking at this point that she has dementia. And she's saying, "Well, why do people want to be so close together?" And he says, "I don't know. I guess we just don't like being alone." This, she just says, "Interesting." And then she asks, "Why do humans sleep inside structures?" And he says, "I don't know, to feel warm and together and safe, I guess." And she says, "Safe from what?" And he says, "I guess animals and other people." And she says, "Oh, okay." And she slowly nods as if she's like making mental notes. And she asks, "And why do you bury your dead?" And he said, "Oh, it's a respect thing." And she says, "Respect?" And she kind of tilted her head and she seemed genuinely puzzled by his answer. And he said, "Yeah, it's so that they can rest." And she says, "Well, do they?" And he kind of nervously laughed because, again, he doesn't really know how to answer these questions. And he said, like, "I don't know. I guess maybe they do, but I guess we don't really know." And she just looks back out the windshield and she says, "Well, you used to know." This was the comment that she made that really just gave him the creeps. He said he remembers all the hair on his arms standing up. It was just a very unsettled feeling. And then she didn't speak again for several miles. And then she said, "And why are you so distressed when someone disappears?" And he said, "Because that's one of the worst feelings that a human can experience." And she says, "Even if someone's not dead, even if they're just somewhere else?" And he says, "Well, yeah, because everyone wants to know, where people go." She says, "Why?" And he says, "Because we miss them." And she looks puzzled again, and she says, "Even after many years?" And he says, "Yes." And then he noticed that she looked at the baby stroller and she touched it. She says, "Do you think mothers still wait?" And he says, "Yeah, I would assume that they always do." And this was the first time that he says that she looked genuinely sad, not confused by the answer to one of his questions. And then she asks, "Do all of you forget where you come from?" And he is like, "I don't know how to continue this conversation." So he just says to her, "I'm sorry, I'm really tired. We're coming up on a town soon. I could pull into a rest stop and you can get out and call somebody if you need to." And she just kind of looks back out the window and she says, "Well, you used to ask permission before traveling through the dark, but you forgot." And he's just quiet because he's done with this conversation. And then she turns her head and she looks at him and she smiles. And she says, "But your children can still hear us." And at this point, he's like, maybe this woman is not as harmless as I thought initially. He is, by all accounts, genuinely just fully creeped out at this point. So they're coming up on the town and he motions to like an exit off in the distance. And he says, "Do you want me to pull off there? Like, is that somewhere that you think you could call somebody?" And she says no. And he says, "Okay, well, where do you want to go? Like, where do you want me to take you at this point?" And she looks out through the passenger window and she just points off in the darkness and she says, "There." And he looks out to where she's pointing and he sees that there's no lights, there's no rest stops, there's no towns. It's just like dense woods and fog. And he says, "Well, there's nothing there." And she says, "Yes, that's why I need to get out here." She says, "Please pull off. We need to get out." So he's like, "You don't have to ask me twice." So he pulls over and she reaches for the door like she's going to get out. But then she turns to him and she says, "You really can't hear them." And he says, "Hear who?" And she says, "The ones beneath everything." And he says, "No, I'm sorry. I don't know what you're talking about." And she smiles again and she says, "Good. That means it hasn't started yet." He says, "What hasn't started?" And she just shakes her head and she says, "In 11 years, you'll come across this road. Don't take it." And she picked up the stroller, set it into its upright position, and walked off into the fog and disappeared. Earl says he got out of there as fast as he could, but the strangest part came a few weeks later because he was at a diner talking to another long-haul trucker that he has known for years, and he was telling him about this woman he picked up and how strange the whole encounter was. And the truck driver asks him to describe this woman, and so he does, and he's like, "You will not believe this, but my father told me almost the exact same story, but it happened to him in the 80s. Apparently the details about the woman matched, but he was thinking it was a coincidence up until Daryl mentioned the detail about the empty baby stroller. It also happened on the exact same stretch of road. Daryl's friend tells him, "Yeah, I always just thought it was a spooky story. My dad told me to scare me when I started trucking, even though he swore it was true. But I don't know now that I've heard your account." But I guess the only difference was that in his father's account, the woman had asked him before she got out of the truck, "Have they started digging?" The man's father asked who she meant. She said, "The ones beneath everything." He said no, and she said good. And then she got out of the truck again in the middle of nowhere before they reached the next town. Daryl says while he's still not sure exactly who or what he picked up that night, the 11-year anniversary of when she warned him to avoid that road is coming up in October of 2028. And he thinks about it every October since it happened. And while he's not sure if he's going to be in that part of northern Montana in October of 2028, part of him thinks that he should avoid it because of the woman's warning, but the other part of him is curious. If you're new here, this is Spooky Scary Storytime, the series of allegedly true listener-submitted stories about the creepiest or most unsettling things people have ever experienced. If you have a story, especially if it's a trucker one, that could be a fun compilation for the podcast, send it in. We would love to hear it.
The person that sent me the story called it, "I don't know what my friends and I saw in the forest here in our province. A demon? A ghost? I don't know." That is a long title. I'm not going to write the whole thing here, but I don't know. Let's see. By the way, if you have a story that you'd like to share with our glitch community about glitches in the Matrix, dreams, aliens, cryptids, or the paranormal, you can send it to this email email address. And remember, we believe you. Hello. Hi. I'm a big fan of your content and please keep my identity unknown. You got it? And I honestly don't know why I'm posting this. Maybe I just want to get it off my chest because it's been bothering me ever since it happened. I know some of you probably are going to think that I'm making this up or that we imagined everything. And honestly, I don't blame you. If I read this from someone else, I probably would think the same thing. But I swear this really happened. I just want to stop for 1 second and tell you that most of us are not going to think that because our community is based on the fact that we believe people's stories. We believe you. We believe you. I'm from Catbalogan City, Samar, here in the Philippines. I definitely butchered the fuck out of that. And here we grow up hearing stories about aswangs, duendes, ghosts, and of course, Biringan City. Biringan City. I'm sorry. I'm definitely not pronouncing this right. A mysterious city that cannot be found on our maps. Oh, that's really interesting. Those stories are pretty normal here, but what happened to us felt completely different. It honestly felt like something I would only ever watch in a horror movie or some Netflix series, not something that could have happened in real life. I'm posting this because maybe someone has experienced something similar, and if anyone here likes hiking or going to forests somewhere along Diversion Road in Catbalogan, Catbalogan, please just be careful. There were 7 of us because we were filming for a school project in one of the forests near Diversion Road. We had already finished filming for the day, packed up all the cameras and equipment, and we were just walking back towards our 3 motorcycles. We were talking, laughing, and making jokes because we were finally done with the project and we were able to head home. We were only a few steps away from the motorcycles when one of my friends suddenly stopped walking. Nobody even asked why. For some reason, all 7 of us looked in the exact same direction at exactly the same time. Standing between the trees was a woman. She wasn't very far away. She was close enough that we could clearly see her. She was wearing a beautiful white ballet outfit that looked perfectly clean. Her black hair was tied up in a ballerina bun, just like professional ballet dancers. Everything about her looked elegant. I know this sounds strange, but she was probably the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. She didn't look like a ghost. She wasn't covered in blood or dressed in old clothes like the ghosts that you see in horror movies. She just looked perfect. And then she smiled at us. I keep thinking about that smile because it wasn't creepy. It wasn't exaggerated or evil. If I had seen that exact smile anywhere else, I probably just would have smiled back. But the second she smiled, every single part of my body started telling me to leave immediately. I'd been scared before, but this wasn't normal fear. It wasn't panic or being startled. It felt like my own body recognized something that my mind couldn't understand. None of us moved. Later, all 7 of us admitted that for a few seconds, we couldn't move at all. Then she spoke. She had a very soft voice, almost comforting, and she only said one sentence. Nahadlok kamo akan? Or in English, are you afraid of me? Do you fear me? Those were her exact words. I honestly don't know how to explain what happened after that. What do you mean? It suddenly felt like she wasn't alone anymore. I couldn't actually see anyone standing beside her, but I swear it felt like there were hundreds of people in that forest. I know how ridiculous this sounds. I didn't see faces. I didn't hear voices. It was just this overwhelming feeling that there were so many others with her just outside what I could actually see. My chest became so heavy that I honestly thought I was going to pass out. I don't know why, but for some reason the thought crossed my mind that maybe they were people she had somehow taken. I have absolutely no reason to think that. It was just the first thing that came into my head. Then she slowly started spinning like a real ballerina. Perfect circles, perfect balance. She moved so gracefully that it honestly didn't even look human anymore. The weird thing is, I don't remember hearing music, but at the same time, my brain kept telling me that there was music playing. Even now, I can't tell if there was really music or if my mind somehow added it afterward because everything felt so unreal. The moment she started dancing, whatever was keeping us frozen suddenly disappeared. Nobody shouted, "Run." Nobody had to. All 7 of us turned around exactly the same time and ran as fast as we could toward our motorcycles. I've never run like that before. We weren't just scared. It felt like pure survival had taken over. One of my friends eventually shouted for everyone to calm down because we were running so blindly that someone was going to trip over a root or slam into a tree. We slowed down just enough to stop hurting ourselves before finally reaching the motorcycles. Right before getting on mine, I looked back to the forest one last time, and I honestly wish that I hadn't. For maybe 2 or 3 seconds, everything changed. I don't know if vision is even the right word because I wasn't asleep and I wasn't unconscious. It was like reality suddenly wasn't the same anymore. Instead of seeing an empty forest, I saw people everywhere between the trees. Some looked like natives, some looked like they were from the Spanish colonial period, others looked like they were from decades ago, and some honestly looked like ordinary people from today. Men, women, even children. Some were crying, some were screaming, some had their hands stretched out towards me like they wanted help. Oh my God, I have so many chills. I couldn't understand what they were saying because it sounded like hundreds of voices speaking over each other, but somehow I knew they were begging for help. The strangest part was that none of them were looking at the woman anymore. They were all looking directly at me. Then, just like that, everything disappeared and the forest looked completely normal again. I never told my friends about that part because I honestly thought maybe my brain was just trying to process everything that happened. We all agreed after that day we'd stop talking about it because none of us wanted people thinking that we'd lost our minds. But keeping quiet somehow made it worse, so I figured I'd post it here instead. Maybe someone has experienced something similar. Maybe we were just so tired we started seeing things because we hadn't had any sleep just for preparing that school project film. If you have, please tell me. Don't tell me it was an Aswang. Don't tell me it was a ghost. Don't tell me she was from Beringen. God damn it. I don't know, honestly, but whatever we saw didn't feel like any of those, or I don't know, she looked completely human, completely beautiful, and somehow that was the most terrifying part. Sometimes I still ask myself, what if she wasn't waiting for us to leave? What if she was waiting for us to notice her? What if she wanted to feed on our fear? I honestly don't know. Maybe our minds just couldn't process whatever we saw, and this is just our brains trying to make sense of it. I really hope that's all it was. Whatever that thing was, I hope I never, ever experience anything like it again. Anyways, despite everything that happened, we still managed to submit our school film project, and thankfully, we passed. Congratulations. We joke about that day sometimes because it's easier than talking about what actually happened, but one thing all 7 of us agree on is that none of us have ever gone back to that part of the forest, and I don't think we ever will. Oh my God, that was so scary. What the fuck was that? I don't even know. Do you guys think it was like some entity that steals people? Like, yes, okay, feeding on fear, but maybe she wanted them to come near her and she was going to steal them and they would die and then their souls would be stuck with all the other souls, all the other people that were like screaming for help and were clearly like being bound by her or something in the forest. Maybe that's why she appeared like superhuman and beautiful, like the most beautiful thing you'd ever seen, and doing beautiful little ballerina moves, like a little ballerina, so that the people wouldn't be scared and they'd be like, whoa, hey, cool. Where'd you learn those moves? Where'd you come from? And they'd walk closer and then they would get taken. Has anybody seen anything like this before? Or what do you guys think? Because I'm like super scared and I don't like it at all. Thank you so much for sharing your story. We believe you. We believe you.
According to a follower named Tim, he saw what he believes to be a werewolf. Not once, but twice, and it followed him home on the second encounter and was right outside of his bedroom window. Now, before I tell this story, as always, there's no way for me to verify it, so please take it as entertainment and you decide for yourself. Now, according to Tim, the first encounter happened during an evening walk while he was walking through a quiet part of the city. And it wasn't completely abandoned, it was just empty enough for him to enjoy the peace and quiet and the silence. Now, about halfway through his walk, he got this overwhelming feeling that someone or something was watching him from somewhere and his spidey senses were going off. So he stopped and he looked around and there was nothing there. But the feeling only got stronger as he continued to walk. And he was trying to get a better view of the area, so he decided to climb up a nearby tree, and he was trying to scan the area to see maybe if there was something or someone, like an animal maybe, or if there was someone in the woods nearby, but he didn't see anything after several minutes. And then something stepped out of the darkness and made itself known. And he describes it as looking like this massive wolf that was standing on 2 legs, roughly 9 feet tall. It had very broad shoulders, long arms, and a head that looked somewhere between a wolf and a large German shepherd. Pretty, similar detailed explanation when people say that they've seen a dogman or a werewolf. And according to him, it slowly began walking out and it was standing right where he was 15 minutes ago. Then it stopped and he turned around and it started to walk back in. And he said every instinct told him not to move, not to breathe, and to just sit perfectly still. And he did, as he just watched this thing. And for nearly 45 minutes had passed before the creature finally fully disappeared into the darkness. and only then did Tim jump down and run all the way home. He tried convincing himself that maybe, it was a trick of the light, his eyes were playing tricks on him or something, but it wasn't until about six weeks later when he woke up around midnight to use the bathroom. Nothing unusual for him, but when he had returned, he said he got this feeling like he just couldn't go back to sleep. So he rolled over and he looked toward his bedroom window, and standing right outside in the little foyer area, perfectly still, watching him, was this same creature. And he says every door outside, every window had multiple locks and everything, but yet somehow it got into that little part of the outside and was watching him through his bedroom window. He said then it did something that he'll never forget. It cocked back its head and it let out this massive growl. And it said it was like a deep echoing scream that pierced through the night. He grabbed the nearest firearm that he had next to his bed, and he backed himself into the corner of the room, and he waited for hours until the sun can come up. And then eventually, this thing went away and the sound stopped. So when morning came, the creature was completely gone, and according to him, it's now been several months, and he hasn't seen it again, but he says the feeling never left him. And he still catches himself looking over his shoulder in his own home. Even when he goes out on a walk, he avoids that area completely. He still feels like when he's out there at night, something is out there watching him, and he'll wake up even in the middle of the night for no reason with this overwhelming feeling that something or that thing is just standing there beyond the window watching him, waiting for him to look back again. So, I don't know. You guys tell me, did he encounter something, unusual, supernatural, a large animal, or did this thing really follow him home that night? Let me know what you guys think in the comments.
I have another unbelievable but true story from a veteran who says that she saw something in the Indian Ocean 41 years ago while on active duty in the Navy that she still has no explanation for. This is from Tammy, and Tammy says that for most of the 4 decades that have passed since she saw this, she has hesitated to tell this story, not because she didn't believe her own eyes, but because she struggled to find a platform in which she felt comfortable sharing, because it didn't really fit anywhere. She said today, obviously, people can pull out their phones from their pocket and record anything that they think is unusual, post it on the internet, and have a million different opinions by the next morning, but this happened in a different world. Okay, but Tammy says that in 1985, she was serving active duty in the Navy, and she was aboard the USS Samuel Gompers 8037, which served from 1967 to 1995. It served essentially as a floating repair shop for destroyers and cruisers, and they were floating somewhere in the vastness of the Indian Ocean on a Westpac deployment. And to give you an idea of how different things were back then, she says they weren't even paid through direct deposit. Back then, every 2 weeks, they were handed their pay in cash. And if you wanted to contact your family while floating in the middle of the ocean, there was no email, no social media, no FaceTime. You literally had to use real mail. And if you were lucky, there was something called a Mars call. And a Mars call sounds almost unbelievable now, but basically if you wanted to call someone in your family, you would sign up for a tiny time slot. And then sometime in the middle of the night when your time slot came, you would report to the Radio Shack, in which the Navy operator would connect to an operator stateside who would then connect to your family. It was a complicated relay system that felt more like talking over a military radio than it did a phone call. And the conversation would end in overs. So the conversation would be like, "Hi mom, I love you, over." Then you would wait and your family would reply and they would also say, "Hi, I love you too, over." Then it was your turn again, but every sentence ended with over, and it was a very long and complicated way of talking to the people that you loved, but it was really the only way to do it back then. So all of that is to say that that is why Tammy found herself alone on the deck of the USS Samuel Gompers at 3 o'clock in the morning. She had just gotten off one of these Mars calls. The time slot for her call had happened at 2 o'clock in the morning, and rather than going back to her bunk after the call had ended, she decided to go up to the deck to relax a little bit and enjoy the stars. And she says, if you've never seen the middle of the ocean from the deck of a ship, it is insane and unlike anything else. The sky is clear and without pollution from highways or city lights, and you can see thousands upon thousands of stars. There are so many stars that she says you could have actually read a book by the starlight if you really wanted to. So that's the setting as she finds herself up on the deck with nothing but starlight and an endless black sea around her. And she said she was just up there relaxing when she noticed about 100 yards away there was a light beaming up from the bottom of the ocean. She was on the upper deck adjacent to the helicopter pad about 3 stories up, but immediately it caught her attention because it was perfectly round and it was keeping pace with the ship. It was a brilliant fluorescent bluish white, unlike anything she had ever seen out in the middle of the ocean. This was absolutely not a small boat keeping pace beside them. For reference, she says the USS Samuel Gompers was about 800 feet long and carried about 1,500 sailors, give or take, and they were not standing still, and yet this circular, brilliant light was matching their pace effortlessly. And then it zoomed closer, much closer, at an impossible speed until it was only about 100 feet off the rail, all while maintaining its perfectly circular shape. But then as she watched in disbelief, it swelled up, almost to the size of the ship itself, bigger than a football field, and then it shrunk back down to about the size of a car. It never changed shape, and she said she had absolutely no idea what she was looking at. So of course, she looked around for anyone who could validate what she was seeing. When she looked back at the light, it had shrunk down to about the size of a spotlight, and then it accelerated downward. It never transformed from its circular shape, but shrunk back into the ocean like something diving downward. And then it was gone, and she stood there staring at the water, trying to make sense of what she had just seen, and she was dumbfounded for several minutes because she had seen bioluminescence coming from the water, she had seen spotlights shining in the water, she had seen equipment displays and reflections, but nothing came close to what she had just witnessed. But she had never seen anything that she just couldn't explain, and as she stared there waiting for it to return, the Indian Ocean just returned to its normal vastness underneath a sky full of stars. When the light failed to come back up, she says she went to speak to the sonar operators because if the ship had come into contact with another vessel beneath the water, they would have known. But they told her there had been no unusual contacts, no submarines, no unexplained readings, nothing that could offer an explanation. There had been nothing. And again, she wanted to emphasize that this was not phosphorescence, this was not searchlights, this was not a training exercise. And she has spent 41 years turning this memory over in her head. So she's sending this in to see if anyone else can offer up a logical explanation for something that she has not thought of yet. Because after 4 decades, all she knows is that she saw something strange in the middle of the Indian Ocean while pacing a Navy ship. It was there and then it wasn't. Tammy is her real name. Let her know if you have thoughts. I'll be sending her the link to this video. And if you have a spooky, scary story time of your own, something you can't explain or that still leaves you unsettled, please send it in. We would love to hear it.
This photo was taken at closing time inside of a completely empty shoe warehouse. Before this happened, employees had already reported experiencing strange sensations while working there, including feeling like they were being watched and noticing objects moving on their own. When the picture was taken, no one else was inside the building, leaving many people wondering if there was something unexplained captured in the image. I went to the cemetery to leave flowers at my mother's grave. While I was there, I noticed a tombstone that had a small chapel-like structure built into it. Suddenly, I heard a strange noise coming from that area. Instead of walking closer to investigate, I decided to take a picture so that I could remember exactly where the sound came from and avoid walking through that area again. But when I looked at the photo days later, I noticed something that gave me chills. There was something inside the structure, but I know for a fact I was the only person in that area. Guys, this one really freaks me out. There's a completely empty house which is listed for sale in my neighborhood. It's been listed for a while, and over time the price has gone down gradually. I thought absolutely nothing of it at the time, but one evening I was out for a walk and I noticed something in one of the top windows of this house. I took a picture because whatever that thing was freaked me out. There was something that looks like an entity looking down at me from the window.
Series of spooky stories except for its unhinged mother-in-law. My husband's biological father told us that him and his wife wouldn't be attending our wedding because they had concert tickets for the night before. We had sent out save the dates about 2 months before and they bought the tickets the week up. I guess this should be unhinged in-laws. Period. If you would quit pissing him off, he wouldn't have hurt you after he twisted my arm and faced charges. He was convicted. What did I do? Denied adult fun playtime the day of my grandma's funeral. She was more of a mom than my mom. Then checked his phone after he asked me to check his phone to see who messaged him so he didn't have to get out of bed. This was 2006 when texting was newer. My mother-in-law disliked me from the beginning. At the time I got with her son, I had a 2-year-old from a previous relationship. She used to get real close to my 2-year-old and say, "Your mother's a bitch." She denies ever doing that despite me hearing it multiple times. I'm no contact with her, and so are my children. When we told my mother-in-law that we miscarried our first baby, her immediate response was, well, that's a good thing because you would have ruined that baby's life. Then told my husband I'm crazy and made it up to make him hate her so I could have him all to myself. What are some of these people? I touched my mother-in-law's fingers while trying to help her with a can of beans. She said, don't ever touch me. Last time I ever stepped foot in her house, I'd rather go pee at a gas station down the street than walk in that house. Mine kept telling anyone and everyone that would listen, oh, I don't think they can afford it. They should probably postpone in hopes that we would push back the wedding. Mind you, we paid for it ourselves perfectly fine. Why do they always have to fucking try and put your business out there? I once apologized for standing up to myself, and my mother-in-law told me that I just don't understand how family works after 15 years of marriage. I also made my ex-husband call his mom from the hospital when my dad had passed to tell her that he loves her. Her response was that we always spend time with my family, and blew off the call. I'm not married or have kids yet, but my mother respected my brother when him and my sister-in-law said just us in the room when she was in labor. I told my mom I plan on doing the same thing when the time comes, and she said, no, you're going to want me there. This is not a choice. I'm going to be in the room with you. I'll be fucking damned that you tell me where you're going to be and where you're not going to be whenever I'm pushing a baby out of me. Her argument is no one's going to be looking down there. No, because my partner and I had talked about how neither one of us wanted anyone in the room other than hospital staff because it was an intimate moment between us. When the time comes, I'm 19 and he's 21. When the time comes we have a baby, it'll just be us. And if my mom is going to throw a fit, then she can deal with never meeting her second grandbaby. End of story. Where do I start with my ex-mother-in-law? She wore white to our wedding. That should have told me everything. Then there was a time my son's appendix ruptured. He's a twin, 4 years old, in the children's ICU prepping for emergency surgery. While the doctor pulled me aside to walk through the next steps, she stayed in the room and explained to him in full detail that the doctor was going to cut his stomach open and pull out all of his intestines to clean them. I came back to him having a full panic attack. She also had active shingles in the children's ICU. Jesus Christ. But the story that still gets me is this one. She lived across the state and would show up unannounced for entire weekends. One time I had a full day planned to Zoo, Space Needle, my favorite Asian grocery store. The twins had been excited all week. Guess who surprised us? My ex, umbilical cord very much still attached, made us all go home. 4 of us, disappointed, scrapping the whole day. I went outside with my book to cool off and overheard her criticizing my housekeeping. A home she showed up to, unannounced, with 4-year-old twin boys. The only thing out of place was a small pile of dishes waiting to go into the dishwasher that was already running. My mother-in-law the next morning after gave birth at 11:45 p.m., came in and looked at our daughter and went, I hope she gets jaundice while still in the hospital. My husband turned and went, why the hell would you say that? My best friend went, are you insane? Why would you wish that on a baby? She went, well, in my day, all babies got it. Didn't apologize. The back in my day. Oh my God. When we were home from the hospital, probably a month later, I was walking out of the door to run to the store while she was visiting, and I had already said goodbye to my baby, and she went, wow, mom doesn't love you, as she should say goodbye every time she leaves the house, because what if she died while she was out? We butted heads on so many occasions, and those are just 2 of the years of issues me and her had. I married her favorite child. Her words. Weird.
Why won't my mom get out of bed? Seriously, like, it's morning now. The sun is up. She should be up too, making breakfast, or at least getting ready. But she instead is staying in her room with the door shut and the lights turned off. It makes me curious, so I go to her door and open it just a little. It's dark, but I can see her sort of wrapped up in the blankets like a cocoon. So I whisper, Mom? And she doesn't answer. So again, I say, Mom, and she doesn't even move. And look, I know that my mom loves me very, very much, and that's what makes me curious, because if she loves me, then why does she stay in bed all morning not answering when I call? Then I think maybe she's sick, or maybe she's hurt. So now I'm worried, and I open the door a little bit further, and I quietly sneak inside. The air inside of her room kind of smells funny, and it's hard to see where I'm going, so I move really slow and quiet and careful, and soon I'm at her bed. And I say, hi, Mom. I wait. Nothing. Up close, I can see that she's lying on her side, turned away from me, and the covers only go up to her shoulders, so I can still see her back freckles and her curly red hair. And I poke her. Hello? Are you sleeping? I was gonna say other stuff too, but that's when I hear it. It kind of sounds like a puppy, or maybe like a baby rabbit when you give it an apple slice. Basically, it's a happy sound for animals, but it is sad when my mom makes that sound because it means that she's crying. So I say, Mom, are you sad? Are you sick? Still, she doesn't answer. So now I'm mad. I'm mad because this time I know she's awake and I know that she's ignoring me. Like, even if you're crying, you shouldn't ignore someone, okay? That's rude. So all at once, I jump up onto the bed. And look, I know that's not a nice thing to do, okay? But I am really, really mad. And I grab her arm and pull her toward me. Then I get up real close and say, "Listen carefully, you ungrateful witch. I have been very patient with you." And I make my scariest frown as I hold her face to mine. She just feels so small, you know, my hands just fit so easily around her neck. And I say, "You know, it would have been easy for me to, your children. When I took you, I could have just their throats as well. But I held back as a gesture of goodwill so that you'd accept your new home, so that you'd learn your role. You must always remember, you have a role to play here. And you better start putting some heart into it, because there is nothing stopping me from going back to that pretty White House and finishing the job." It's quiet for a while after that. Like, we're both in timeout. But suddenly I'm not mad anymore. I mean, I look over at Mom and her eyes are red, but she's not crying, so I think we're okay. So I say, "Mom, will you brush my hair?" She says, "Okay, sweetie." And after that, pancakes?
If I'm going to be scared, you are going to be scared with me. It is time for another spooky story. I am Autumn in Appalachia. Send me your spooky stories, add me on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. Same handle. Without further ado. So the spooky story that I posted yesterday, somebody left this comment on that story, and I went to check out their story, and you guys, I've got to get this one off my chest. You know, we usually go in order, but there is something about this particular subject that fascinates me and also terrifies me, and it is really creepy the amount of DMs that I get about whatever the hell this thing is, okay? So we're just going to call this follower Laura because I didn't catch her name, but I'll tag her. She lives in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains. She's grown up in the Appalachians, and she said that the property she lived on when she was 13, it is in the middle of the woods. Their closest neighbor is like 12 miles from them, so they're in a very remote wooded area. One weekend when she's like 13, her cousin comes over to stay the weekend with her. Now, her cousin, she said, she's from the city. She's never experienced the Appalachians, the woods, and so she asked Laura, like, "Hey, can we go camping in the woods tonight?" And Laura's like, "Yeah, that's a good idea." Well, at the end of their wooded property, her dad has this old camper that is parked, and he's got like a fire pit and all that down there. So that's what they're thinking. They ask her dad's permission, and he's like, "Yeah, y'all can, but make sure you take the dog with you." Now, Laura had like a Great Pyrenees dog, and he's chill, he's protective, he follows her everywhere. So they get all their stuff together for like s'mores. They take her laptop so they can watch movies, sleeping bags, the whole nine, and they go down to the camper right about dusk. They start a fire up, and as you do, they begin telling each other spooky stories. Laura begins telling her cousin about this barn that's like a mile up the road from them, and it is like off the road, it's in the woods, but it's like this old, you know, kind of like falling down, like rotting barn. And sometimes Laura and her dad at night would hear weird noises coming from this barn. They'd always talked about it, but obviously have never, like, they live in the Appalachians, they know, they never go like check it out when they hear the noises. Now her cousin, though, she's not familiar with the rules of Appalachia, and so she's like, "Oh, like, let's go check out this barn and like see what we can find." And Laura is hesitant, but she's like, "Okay, but we cannot let my dad catch us, so we're gonna have to wait until all the lights in the house go off and we know he's asleep." So they wait. Literally, it's like almost midnight. All the lights in the house go off, and they know they can sneak off without getting caught. So they make their way a mile down the road in the dark to this barn, and when they get there, they're kind of looking around. The dog, he's following them. He's not acting any particular way. Laura is paying attention to his body language. He seems chill, and they're looking around. Nothing's really happening. They're not hearing anything. Laura said they just start acting goofy. They're like jumping out, trying to scare each other, having a fun time, but eventually out of boredom, because nothing is happening, they decide they're going to head back to the camper. So they turn around to start to walk away from this barn, and Laura, as they're walking away, notices that her dog's body language suddenly changed. It's like he's stiffened, and he keeps looking behind him, like back toward the barn. Now, in moments even, Laura said that it seems like he's like nudging them forward, trying to get them to walk away faster. So this kind of makes her, heart skip a little, and she decides to follow her dog's line of sight to see what he's looking at. When she does, she saw it, and she said her heart stopped. Crouched on top of this barn is something. She has no idea what it is, but silhouetted in the moonlight, she can make out certain details. She said its skin was like a very pale gray color. It had yellow piercing eyes that like reflected in the dark like an animal. It had unnaturally long arms, longer than a person or animal's arms should be. And on top of its head are what looks like deer antlers. Now, when she saw this, every hair on her body stood on end, and her dog and she both are just frozen, staring at it. Her cousin's not seen it yet, and Laura thinks that just maybe they got lucky, and that this thing has not noticed them. So she turns the flashlights off, and as quietly as she can, she nudges her cousin behind a pile of brush. Her cousin's like, "What are we doing?" And she is like, "Don't move. Make a sound." She peers out from behind this brush. I'm getting chill bumps saying this, y'all. And tries to like get an eyeball on this thing again, when suddenly they hear this thing jump, like leap off of the roof of this barn and land on its feet. The second that it hit the ground, the dog takes off after it. He is like barking, growling, and they hear both of them run off into the woods. Now, at this point, her cousin has seen it. They are terrified out of their wits. They are crying. They're screaming. They run as fast as they can back to the house to wake up Laura's dad. By the time that they get back to the property, Laura said she saw her dad like running off of the porch steps. They had been screaming so loud that it woke her dad up out of a dead sleep, and her mom, and they are like trying to come out there to go after the girls. Now, they, in a frenzy, are trying to tell them what they saw, that the dog has gone after it, and her dad like rushes them inside to Laura's mom. Laura's mom's trying to comfort them, saying like it's gonna be okay. Her dad, I'm watching my wording, gets his pew-pew. He calls his buddy from up the holler, and they go off into the woods to track this thing and try to get the dog back. Now, Laura said that they were up all night waiting on her dad to come back home. Her dad and her dog did not make it back home until daylight, and when they finally walked through the door, Laura realized her dog is injured. It had been attacked by this thing, like on one side of its body, and they had to call the vet. The vet comes out to the house, and after assessing the injuries and treating them, says that it looks like their dog was attacked by like a big cat, like a mountain lion or something. And Laura obviously knows that is not what attacked her dog, but that concreted that much more and horrified her that much more, like how close they potentially came to something really bad happening to them had their dog not run after that thing. You really have to wonder as well that when this thing jumped off of the roof, did it have full intentions on coming after those girls, and was the dog the only thing that stopped that? Something else her dad said that absolutely sent chills down my spine when I read it. When he and his buddy were tracking this thing that night, number one, it made laps around the perimeter of their property all night, over and over again. And two, when they found those tracks, whatever it was definitely on two legs, and the tracks in moments looked like deer tracks, and then it would turn into drag marks. And that is not something that her dad or his buddy had ever seen before and did not know how to explain. That is absolutely terrifying. Laura said that that is a night that she nor any of her family will ever forget, and these days she is very careful to follow the rules of Appalachia. You guys will be happy to know that her dog did end up being okay, fully recovered from its injuries, and actually just passed away a few years ago from old age. But y'all, Closing notes. It is uncomfortable the amount of story submissions that I get about whatever the hell this thing is. A lot of folks around here in Appalachia call it a knot deer. I don't know what the hell to call it, but I hope that I never see it. And everybody who sends me stories from different states, you know, that are around the Appalachians, it's all the same stuff. It's either like a white or like a pale gray. People who have seen it fully, like standing and not crouched, say it's like 7 to 8 foot tall. It has the deer antlers. Some folks have even said that when they get a really good look at its face, there are no facial features. It's almost like its skin is pulled too tightly across its face, and there are just like these hollowed out spots where a face kind of should be, almost like it's skeletal or something. Or people say they see it and they see like what Laura saw with the yellow piercing eyes. Oh God, so freaking creepy. You guys let me know what your theories are, what you think in the comments, or if you have any questions for Laura, because she will be tagged on TikTok, and stay tuned for some more spooky stories.
Now, I think there is a spirit is in this apartment that we have recently moved to. If you're new to my page, every Friday I release a new little sketch, a little Irish mammy skit of my late mother who passed away many years ago, and to keep her memory alive, I just do little sketches of the things she used to say and do. I know it sounds really strange, but I get into character. I wear her clothes, I wear her jacket, I wear her scarf, I even wear her perfume when I'm doing these little Irish skits. This week, when I got into character, was all dressed up in my mum's clothes, ready to do my little Irish sketch. This went off. I've done a little TikTok about it, and it's basically the wording that is on my mother's gravestone, which is, if tears could build a stairway in memory lane, I'd walk back up to heaven and I'd bring you home again. That started to go off on its own while I'm in character, while I'm dressed as my mother, about to do a little Irish skit. Recently moved to this apartment, and I know that there was an old lady that lived in this apartment before we did, and I'm not sure if she passed away in this apartment, but I think she did. Also have 3 other spirits in this apartment living with me. My mother-in-law, Auntie Eva, and my husband's grandmother. Their ashes were brought with us. I'm never alone here. I'm not actually scared of spirits. It doesn't frighten me. Mum used to always say, you should be more scared of the feckin' living than the dead. And that is so true. The reason behind this post is I was doing another little Irish sketch yesterday in preparation for tonight's little mammy sketch called Irish Mammy Friday. So I was editing my little sketch last night. Didn't hear it while I was doing the little sketch, but as I was editing, I could hear a little whisper, and I don't know if you can hear it as well. My husband can. Really delicate little whisper, but if you listen really closely, I think I can hear, where am I? It's really faint, but I can hear, where am I? There's no one in this flat, only me on my own doing this little sketch. So embarrassing doing them if anybody else is in the place. My husband was working away, no television on, it was really quiet, all the windows were shut, so that little whisper that I didn't hear while I was doing it, but while I was editing, I could hear, where am I? It could be my mum going, where the feck am I now? It also could be my mother-in-law, Auntie Eva, or Stacey's nan. Please let me know in the comments if you can hear it as well. Where am I?
I stayed at the Grey Wolf Inn, and every single picture that I took at the hotel had the same person missing in every picture. A couple summers back, my family and I went to go stay on a vacation at the Grey Wolf's Inn Hotel, and we did this pretty much every year, if not every other year. Like, this was a family vacation, and it was always very normal and very fun. Most of the trip, we would spend riding bikes around the island, we would go and get fudge every year. It was a lot of fun. On our second day, my friends messaged me and they said that they wanted pictures because they've heard stories about this inn. And so I was taking pictures of everything, like the lobby, the fireplace, our room, literally everything. In the evening, I was scrolling through my pictures and I was going to send them to my friends. And I noticed that the one by the fireplace, there was a lady. She was wearing this long navy blue dress and she was reading a book. Now, I remember seeing her because she smiled at me when I passed her. And then about 15 minutes later, I had taken a picture of the elevator, like on the outside. And in the background of that picture was the same lady. She was wearing the same blue dress, holding the same book, and had like a content, like, smile on her face. I thought it was funny that we kept crossing paths, but I guess if we were staying at the same hotel, it made sense. And then the next morning, we were gonna go leave, and I saw her in one of the rocking chairs at the front of the entrance. I smiled at her, she smiled back. We probably just both knew that we kept seeing each other. It was fine. That same night, I went to go post some pictures online of my vacation. And as I was going through the pictures again, I noticed that the lady was no longer in the pictures. The one on the fireplace where I know I saw her the day before, she was no longer there. She was no longer there in the background of the elevator picture, not in the hallway picture. I started to get really confused, so I exited out of my app and I went to my photos to check out the originals. And yeah, she wasn't there in any of the pictures anymore. The next morning, I talked to my parents about it. I'm like, do you guys remember seeing like this older lady? She had like this long blue dress. And they looked at me like I was crazy. They hadn't seen this lady even though I was with them walking like through all of these spaces. The day of checkout, I casually brought it up to the lady at the front desk and I said, hey, like, do you remember seeing or checking in a guest that looked like this? And I described her and she said, was she carrying like a book with her all the time? It was like a light blue book. And I said, yeah, that's the one. And she said, you're not the first guest to talk about this lady. But I can tell you that she doesn't check in and she doesn't check out. I've never seen her personally, but guests do bring her up from time to time over like the last couple of years. Before I could say anything else, another guest came up that she needed to help, whatever. I was on the ferry ride back home and I couldn't stop thinking about this. A few days later, I actually went online just to see if I could Google and something random would come up. And sure enough, an article did come up about an older woman who passed away at the same hotel that I was staying at due to a fatal heart attack. And it did show a picture of her and she was holding that same book in the picture. I still have all my vacation pictures. And when I look through them, I know that there's not a lady there, but I know for a fact that there used to be. And I know that I smiled at her a couple times throughout my experience. So I guess I must have been smiling at a ghost.
My aunt has a friend who used to teach in a very old school in her village. She loved all of her students very much, and one day, tragically, one of her students passed away. Sometime after this, she ended up getting married, and according to her, that particular student had promised her that she would come to her wedding. Going through all of her wedding photos, she realized she caught this in one of them. Me, my family, and some friends were at a daytime history tour at a correctional facility that shut down recently in Australia. We had a really cool guide who also happened to be the only male with us. We were having a lot of fun, and then we made it to the ward where PDFs were once held. The guide let us roam around on our own and we entered every cell as we pleased. Me and my friend ventured to the top floor to immediately investigate a room where one of the worst residents resided. I took some videos and then we finished the tour. It was only when I got home and decided to watch the videos that I took that I realized there was a very obvious male whisper that sounded as if it were right in front of my camera, which wouldn't be possible because, like I said, the only man was the tour guide and he was downstairs. I'm a very religious person, and I've always kept a Quran in my room because I believe that it wards off entities and evil spirits. One night, my grandma borrowed my Quran, and I couldn't sleep at all. I kept getting the feeling that I was being watched through the crack of my wardrobe.
Want to get creeped out? Years and years ago, I heard about this ritual. Okay. And the story went along the lines of you go into this room in your house, you set up these chairs and these mirrors and this candle. You have to do it at a certain time. And the people who do it have a crazy ass experience. This is called the Three Kings ritual. Years later, I found stories of people who actually tried the ritual and some of them had really crazy things happen to them. So the Three Kings ritual is basically presented as a way to see the shadow side, a way to see the other side, but it's also meant to be an enlightening experience. The idea is you set up these chairs, you're sitting in this dark room in the middle of the night, you have these two mirrors on either side of you, and you have a candle, and a lot of people see things, hear things, and experience paranormal activity before, after, during, all three. Sometimes people have enlightening experiences, and sometimes people have terrifying experiences. My sister and I have a podcast, Just a Little Stitches, and this month we decided to only talk about creepy games and rituals. So we had 2 episodes come out that are about what the creepy games and rituals are and how you perform them. So if you're interested in things like this, go watch those 2 episodes. But also prepare yourself, because the next 2 episodes in July are stories of people who have tried these weird, occult, creepy games and rituals that may have been made up on the internet, but at the end of the day are still a ritual and a lot of times still inviting something into your home. Jess and I actually had a paranormal experience ourselves one night when talking about the Man in the Fields ritual. It was really creepy. We were talking about how when you invite something in, how you put intention out there that something might come, and we actually got an EVP of something saying here while we were recording. It was crazy.
If you have glass doors, be careful because you don't know what you might see at night. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage, where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a blanket and get cozy, because it's creepy cozy time at the Creepy Cozy Cottage. This is a new account, so give me a follow so you never miss a story. When I was in my 20s, I lived by myself for a while. Looking back, that apartment was probably one of my favorite places I'd ever lived. I decorated the whole thing in this hippie boho style before that was even really a trend. Everything was wood and earthy colors. I had driftwood decorations, plants everywhere, little candles, and wooded bead curtains hanging in a couple of the doorways. It felt peaceful. It felt like home. There was only one thing I hated. The apartment was on the 2nd floor, but every apartment had a little balcony that connected to the shared outdoor walkway. The walkway ran past everyone's front doors and balconies, and each balcony had a gate that opened onto it. My balcony had a sliding glass door that led straight into my kitchen and dining room. Sure, the door locked, but every night I'd lay in bed thinking about how a piece of glass wasn't exactly going to stop someone who really wanted inside. Pets weren't allowed, so getting a big dog wasn't an option either. I'd grown up around hunting and pew-pews, and I was a broke 20-something living alone. Buying one honestly never even crossed my mind back then. Instead, I kept a rusty kitchen knife under my bed. Every single night before I went to sleep, I'd shove my dresser in front of my bedroom door. Every single night. Looking back now, I realize how sad that is. It's no way to live, but at the time, it had become my routine. If someone wasn't staying over with me, I was scared almost every night. One night, sometime after midnight, I woke up thirsty. Normally, I'd bring a bottle of water into my room because I hated leaving it once I'd barricaded myself in. Of course, this was the one night I forgot. I remember standing there for a minute, debating whether I could just ignore being thirsty until morning. Eventually, I grabbed my knife, moved the dresser just enough to squeeze out of my bedroom, and walked toward the kitchen. The sliding glass door was in the dining area. It had those long vertical blinds that sway back and forth whenever the air conditioning kicked on. The blinds were moving like they always did, nothing unusual, but as they shifted, I thought I saw something. A dark shape. At first, I couldn't make sense of what I was looking at because it was so dark outside. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. The blinds swayed. The shadow was still there. Then, bang! A loud thud slammed into the sliding glass door. It wasn't a knock. It wasn't someone accidentally bumping into it. It sounded like someone had just thrown their shoulder into the glass. The sound exploded through my apartment. I screamed. Whoever was outside froze. Everything happened at once. I instantly realized my phone was still in my bedroom. I raised the knife. My feet felt glued to the floor. People always say you never know whether you'll fight or flee until it happens. I've learned over the years that my first instinct has always been fight. I held up the knife, even though there was no way they could see it through the blinds, and screamed, "I have a knife. Go away. I have a knife." I was absolutely hysterical. I could barely breathe. I remember thinking I was hyperventilating so bad I might actually pass out. The figure still didn't move, so I stomped my foot and screamed even louder. By then, I was crying so hard I don't even know if the words came out clearly. After that, I stopped trying to form sentences. I just screamed over and over, as loud as I possibly could. Finally, it was like whoever was out there snapped out of whatever they were doing. I heard them let go of the door, then footsteps. They ran back through the little gate they'd opened to get into my balcony and disappeared down the walkway. I kept screaming for another minute or two. Then my body just gave out. I collapsed right there on the kitchen floor and cried. I did finally pull myself together enough to go back to my bedroom and get my phone. The first person I called was my dad. He lived about 3 hours away. There wasn't anything he could do in that moment. I just wanted my dad. He stayed on the phone with me while I cried. I never went back to sleep. The next morning, he drove all the way to my apartment. He helped me install one of those security bars that wedges into the track of the sliding glass door so it can't be forced open. I don't know if it actually would have stopped someone determined enough, but it made me feel a little better. I've reported everything to both the police and my landlord. Unfortunately, there wasn't much either of them could do. No cameras, no description, no proof besides what I'd experienced. I stayed there until my lease ended because I couldn't afford to leave early. To this day, I still wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed in bed, or if I'd been too scared to yell, or if I'd froze instead of screaming. I'll never know. But even now, years later, whenever I see one of those vertical blinds gently swaying in front of a sliding glass door, I'm right back in that apartment, staring at a shadow I couldn't quite make out right before it slammed into the glass. Let me know what you think, and if you have any scary stories of your own you'd like me to share, just send me a DM.
Tonight's story was submitted by a good friend of mine who gave me permission to share her experience. This happened when she was still in high school. One afternoon, she invited her best friend, who she lovingly called Smalls, over to spend the day with her. Like any ordinary day on the farm, she asked Smalls to walk with her to the barn when she fed and cared for her show pigs. As she walked inside the barn, she noticed Smalls had stopped at the doorway. No matter how many times she asked her to come in, she wouldn't. Instead, Smalls quietly said, "I'll tell you when we get back to the house." After finishing the chores, they walked back. Curious, she finally asked why her friend had refused to enter the barn. Smalls looked at her and said something she never expected to hear. "I can see dead people, and it looked like a man was watching over you, making sure you were okay." At first, she didn't know what to think. She asked Smalls to describe the man. As she listened, her heart sank. Smalls described a man wearing a simple t-shirt and a pair of coveralls. The description matched her grandfather perfectly. There was just one problem. She never told Smalls anything about him. In fact, she had never even met him. Her grandfather had passed away in the year 2000, a year before she was born. She walked over to the refrigerator and showed Smalls a photograph of her grandfather. Without hesitation, Smalls nodded. "That's him." She told me it was one of the most emotional moments of her life, not because it answered every question, but because for the first time, she felt like she'd been given a glimpse of someone she had never had the chance to meet. And maybe, just maybe, he had been watching over her all along. Do you believe our loved ones continue to watch over us after they've gone? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you have a ghost story you'd like me to share, you can submit it through the ghost story submissions form in the link in my bio. Until next time, may the ones we love never be far from our hearts. And may their memories always light our way.
Get ready with me while I tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. I was somewhere between 10 and 12 years old when I experienced everything I'm about to share with you. At the time, we were living on an army base in North Carolina, where my dad was stationed. And to understand this story, I have to explain my dad a little. He wasn't an easy person to live with. He struggled with alcoholism and had a short temper most days. And it felt like everyone in the house had to walk on eggshells around him. There was just always this heavy and negative energy hanging around the house when he was home. The first thing happened one afternoon while I was lying across my bed scrolling on my phone. The upper part of my body was on the mattress, and my legs were hanging off the side. From where I was laying, I had a perfect view of the staircase that led upstairs. My parents' bedroom sat immediately to the left at the top of the stairs, so anyone coming up the stairs had to pass directly through my line of sight. My first issue that I have with this is, why are we letting our feet dangle over the side of the bed? Okay, we are asking for something to come out, grab, and pull you into the unknown world that is under the bed. Okay, nobody knows what goes on down there. Nobody wants to find out. And while laying there in that line of sight, I suddenly caught movement. Something had rushed up the stairs and darted into my parents' bedroom. It happened so fast that it was weird, but naturally I assumed it was my dad, so I called out to him, waited a few seconds, and got no response. Using the word rushed when talking about something paranormal really just gives me the absolute creeps and goosebumps, because I just picture something moving at like lightning speed. The type of speed where nothing living or human could reach. It's just like a bloop, like a little blip. Like, ooh, and I don't know why, but those things from the movie I Am Legend just always come to my mind when I'm thinking of something moving so fast. Not necessarily like their speed, but just when I picture something going fast, for some reason, that is the thing I picture. I figured maybe he hadn't heard me, or it wasn't all that important. So I went back to scrolling on my phone, and about 10 minutes later, I finally got up and headed downstairs. That's when I found my dad in his usual spot on the couch, where he'd apparently been all afternoon. I still thought that he had gone upstairs though, so I asked him why he'd gone upstairs and why he hadn't answered me when I called out to him. He genuinely had no idea of what I was talking about. He told me that he hadn't been upstairs at all. What? In that moment, I thought, okay, maybe I'd mistaken him for my mom. So I asked her too, but she also hadn't gone upstairs. I know I saw someone. I was confident enough in that I had actually seen something moving past the doorway that I had called out to them. Now you're starting to feel crazy. That's the worst part of it all, is knowing that you had seen something, knowing that something had been there. But then that doubt starts to creep in, and then you're like, maybe I didn't. And you start to feel like you're going crazy. You're starting to feel like you're saying things, because you are saying things, but it's just things that you don't have like a logical explanation for. And that's the worst. Later that night, around 2 a.m, when the rest of the house had gone to bed, I found myself awake and on my phone again. But eventually I rolled over to face the wall to finally try and get some sleep. And just as I started closing my eyes, I heard them. Slow and heavy footsteps walking up the stairs. Now the stairs were completely carpeted, but the wooden floor beneath creaked loudly with each step. It was basically impossible for you to come up those stairs quietly. The footsteps climbed every single step, and as I listened, I came to the horrifying realization that they turned in the direction of my bedroom. No. Imagine laying there and listening to all of this happen, and you're just frozen, right? You're frozen there. You don't know what's going on, but all you can hear are these heavy footsteps that shouldn't be happening, but they are. They are happening, and they're coming towards your room. Oh my God. I listened. Step, 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 as each one of those steps walked and stopped right outside my door. Terrified, I was expecting some sort of something, but nothing came after that. No knock or voice, no doorknob turning on its own or the door being pushed open. but I still stayed completely still, too scared to roll over and look. Years passed after that night, and my parents eventually got divorced. I only saw my dad during visitations, and by then our relationship had completely fallen apart. We would argue constantly, and every conversation we would have would just turn into a fight. One day, he stormed into my room, absolutely furious. He just stood there screaming at me, and I remember standing there, trying not to cry while he yelled, when I noticed something standing behind him. Resting one long arm across his shoulder, a figure. What? Something I'd never seen before or since. It was crazy tall and painfully thin and completely black. It looked like it was absorbing all of the light around it. And the figure only had one discernible feature on its face, a smile. Yuck. The thing about a smile being creepy is that it's meant to be warm and inviting and comforting, but as soon as it turns sinister and creepy and like making the warning signals in your body go off, oof. And this thing wasn't facing my dad. It was facing me, as if it were staring at me with its non-existent eyes. And I got the feeling that it was happy, enjoying every second of what was happening to me in that moment. I felt like it was breathing in all of the anger and sadness and hurt filling the space, and I couldn't take my eyes off of it. The argument had suddenly faded into the background, and all I could think over and over was, what the hell is that? Eventually, my dad got tired and walked away, and the figure went with him. Not long after that, I stopped speaking to him altogether. I still don't know what I saw that day, and it's been years since it's happened, but I think back and I really feel like there were moments when my dad was angry that he just didn't feel like himself. His expression would change, his eyes became empty, and I wonder if it ever really was him or if it's been someone else all along. Girl.
I want to do a little series on here where we talk about each level of the backrooms, because I love the backrooms, but there's a lot of levels that I don't know anything about, so I want to research it and then make little videos about it too, because I just love it and I want to share it with people. I will keep doing a scary story every single day like I normally do. This will just be an addition to that. It's still a Creepy Cozy Cottage where Creepy and Cozy meet, and we have a new friend named Francesca, Frankie for short, in case anybody cared. So I wanted to start with level 0, but I feel like everybody already knows everything about level 0. At this point, it's so iconic. The wallpaper pattern, humming of the lights, the smell of the musty carpet, the hallways and corridors shifting and just going on and on forever. We all know about that. So let's just jump right into level 1. Level 1 is called the habitable zone. It's described as being like an abandoned warehouse or utility complex. It's the first level that introduces real resources and real dangers. It's filled with long concrete walls, industrial hallways, exposed pipes, electrical wiring. Everything is cold and kind of damp, which just sounds absolutely horrible. There's not a constant buzz of fluorescent lights like there is in level 0. In this level, the lights are very inconsistent, so some may be flickering, some may be really brightly lit, others dimly lit. Scary is that there can be power outages. So imagine you're stuck in this cold, damp place. You don't know what the light situation is going to go on, and then all of a sudden it goes completely dark. You might hear pipes dripping, machinery running somewhere like way in the distance. Some say you even hear the echo of footsteps, which is so creepy. Now let's talk about some of the positive aspects, which is the resources that this level provides. You can find bottles of almond water, which is believed to calm the mind. I don't think it would calm mine, but it's believed to calm the mind and restore energy. Flashlights, batteries, blankets, food storage. You might even find clothing and tools. I had to use my mic, sorry if the sound was bad at first. Some of the entities that can be found in this level are hounds, dolers, skin stealers, and death moths. Death moths, yeah. But death moths are rare in this level, at least. If you come across a hound, stay quiet and avoid drawing attention to yourself, because they can chase you for up to miles. Dolers can stalk you from a distance, and they will blend into like dim surroundings. Skin stealers are kind of what they sound like. They wear people's skin as a disguise. They're very deceptive because they can lure you in looking like a normal person. Death moths are giant moth-like creatures. Some people say the males are more aggressive than the females, but they're usually found in later levels, so it's rare to find it, but they can apparently be in this level. Some people say you might find in this level small survivor groups that will help, like, people that are lost in the back rooms and stuff, and they'll give you supplies, maps. You could find anything from huge warehouse rooms to office spaces to utility tunnels to even stairwells. You might be able to exit this level by going into some stairwells or tunnels, but no clipping to another level, escaping is not a guarantee. Now, the next episode of this backroom series will talk about level 2, which is called Pipe Dreams. It's said that this is the level where the backrooms can get very dangerous. I tried to keep that as short as possible. Let me know if there's anything you want me to look up or look into to make a video about in terms of the backrooms. Anything you want me to talk about the backrooms, I'm happy to do so. So just let me know. And let me know what you think about this level and what would you do if you were in this level? I already have mental health issues, so I don't think I would do very well in any of the back rooms. I think I would lose my mind pretty fast. But let me know what your strategies would be. I'm interested to hear it. Say bye to Francesca. She says bye. Okay, bye.
Now, me and my family have always been plagued with paranormal stuff always happening to us, and I'm going to share with you guys one of the stories that happened to me and my younger sister specifically, but my whole entire family. So when I was about 18, we moved into this home. It was a 2-story home. It had a semi-finished basement where my sister and her boyfriend lived, and it wasn't in the most desirable part of town. It wasn't in the best part of town. It was kind of in the middle. Excuse my chest, my rosacea is flaring up really bad lately. So we move into this house. My sister and her boyfriend had the downstairs basement room. My other sister, my older sister, had a room that was kind of off to the side of the kitchen. And me and my sister had a room upstairs. And my mom had the master suite with the bathroom that was downstairs on the first story. Now, we moved in, everything seemed fine, we were all tired, and we all went to bed about 10 o'clock, and me and my sister had the rooms right next to each other, and I felt like I was being watched the whole entire night. I could not get a full sleep at all, and I knew that I closed my door, but every time I woke up, my door was cracked open. Now, I did get up to go to the bathroom a couple times, so I just thought that when I was getting up and going to the bathroom, maybe I wasn't shutting the door all the way, or maybe I did leave it cracked open. I don't remember. So I kind of just pushed that off to the side, and I just told myself, look, this is a new house. You're getting yourself worked up. Just put it in the back of your mind. It was Saturday morning, but my mom and my sister was at work, and my other 2 sisters were actually asleep. So I went downstairs, I went into the kitchen, and I noticed all the cabinets were open. Again, I thought it was super strange. I closed all the cabinets, I made breakfast, and I carried on with my day. Now, when my mom and my sisters came home, we were all having dinner, we were all chilling in the living room, watching TV, and I mentioned, hey, why did you guys open up all those cabinets and didn't close them? Now, my mom, my sister, everyone in the house said, we didn't do that. But again, we really didn't pay too much attention to it. I mean, we just moved into this house. We were super tired. We were doing a lot. We were still cleaning the other house. We were just doing a whole bunch of shit. So we pushed it off to the side. Now, the next couple nights, again, I cannot get a full night's sleep. And I know for a fact that I am closing my door. I make sure that my door is closed and you cannot open it. Like I'm tugging on the door to make sure that I didn't crack it. Whatever, I would go to sleep, and again, I would wake up and that door would be open. So I mentioned it to my mom, and my mom's like, look, there is wind, this is an old house. Maybe, when we open up other doors in the house, it kind of pushes your door open. I'm going to get you a lock, and you could put the lock on your door. And it was one of these locks. So she went to Walmart, she picked up a couple, and my sister actually, as she was leaving to go to the store to pick up one of these, my sister also told her, look, I'm having the same problem too. So my mom went, she got a couple for me, she got a couple for her, and we went, and my brother-in-law helped us, my soon-to-be brother-in-law, it was actually my sister's boyfriend at the time, went and he helped us install these locks. Now, after we installed these locks, nothing happened. Our doors didn't open, so we just assumed it was that. But then weird shit started happening around the house. Now, as you guys remember, I told you one of my older sisters had a room that was off from the kitchen. She's sleeping. This isn't even 2 weeks into moving in the house. She's sleeping, and all of a sudden she just hears crash. She hears glass breaking. She freaks out. She opens up her door and she sees one of the windows in the kitchen. They were broke. But one of the weird things is that it looked like there was a pan that was sitting on our stove, a clean pan. You know, my mother washed it, put it up on the stove. This pan was taken and it was thrown across the room at the window. So by the time this happens, my mother wakes up, we all wake up, and we rush into the kitchen, and we see my sister standing there, and we're like, girl, why did you throw a frying pan at the window? And she's like, I didn't. I woke up to this crashing sound, and I came out, and this is what it was. Now, we're all freaked out by this point, but we just clean up the glass. My brother-in-law puts cardboard over the window so we can deal with it in the morning. We all go back to bed. Now, as I'm laying upstairs and I'm sitting here thinking, I hear footsteps outside of my door. So I get up, I go to my door, I open up my door, and there's nobody there. Now, there's no way that somebody could have walked up to my door and ran down the stairs in enough time to where I could have opened up the door and not saw anybody. The way the stairs were set up, I would have saw somebody running down the stairs anyways, if that was the case, but there was nobody there. And I was expecting to see one of my sisters, my mother, my, brother-in-law just checking in on me about, everything that happened. So that freaked me out. So I slammed the door, I latch it, and I'm laying there. I'm looking at the door, and I must have fell asleep eventually, because the next thing I remember is waking up in the morning, and my door is wide open. Not only is my door wide open, it is slammed against the wall to the point where there is a hole in the wall by the doorknob. But I didn't hear that. I didn't wake up to the, door slamming against the wall and waking me up. My sisters didn't. My mother, brother-in-law, my other sister, nobody heard this happening. So by now, everybody's come to the same consensus as me as this house is fucking haunted. So by now, even some crazier shit is happening. We will put our keys or, my mom's name badge. She'd just set it down on the table, go into the kitchen or bathroom or whatever, come back in the living room or her room. It would be missing. We would tear up the whole entire house. We could not find it. We would go through couches, even drawers. And she'd say, no, I just put it right there, because we had a long entryway. And she would say, I just put it on the entryway table just to run in here really quick. And then we would go about our business. We'd come home and we would find the keys and the name badge right where she said she placed it. One morning, my younger sister, who was sharing the upstairs with me, who had the room right next to me, she comes up to me very, very frightened. She told me that she heard two men arguing right outside of her door for a better part of the whole entire night. Now, again, my room is right by her, and I didn't hear this because I was sleeping, but she said she heard two men go at it for a couple of hours. And she said that it sounded like kind of a more middle-aged man, and it sounded like an older man. And she said that they were yelling, like they were yelling back and forth at each other. But here's the weird thing. She said she couldn't understand anything they were saying. Like, when you hear screaming, but you don't hear the exact words. She said that's what it was, even though she could have heard the words. Like, they were that close. She said she didn't make out any words, but they were going back and forth with each other. And she said whenever she would go to her bedroom door, open it up, there would be no one there. Now, one night, she is taking a shower up in our bathroom. And our bathroom had, like, the sliding doors, and they had that foggy glass. You guys all know what I'm talking about. So she's taking a shower. She said she just got done rinsing shampoo out of her hair. And then she said all of a sudden she hears a male voice say, hey. So she turns around, she looks over, she opens up the door, she looks all over the bathroom, she doesn't see anybody. Now she was thinking maybe my brother-in-law is calling for me outside the door, puts a towel on, goes outside the door, opens it, nobody's there. She thought maybe I was just hearing things. She goes back in the shower and she is washing her body, and she said she turns to the left, and as she turns to the left, she sees the silhouette of a man. And she said this man was kind of short, somewhat skinny looking. And she said all of a sudden she just sees a fist just go boom up against this foggy sliding glass door. And she said she started to scream. Now, when she screamed, my brother-in-law, my sister, and my mother were home. Those were the only 3 people home. They hear her screaming and they rush up, and my sister is hysterically crying. She can't get a word out. She can't breathe. She said that when this apparition punched the shower door, it just disappeared. She is absolutely terrified by this point, so she gets dressed. My mom, is in the bathroom with her. She gets dried, she gets dressed, and she also goes downstairs and she sleeps with my mom in her bed that night. And guys, it just keeps on escalating, so go to part 2, because I promise you guys, it just gets even crazier. Welcome to part 2 of our family haunting. I don't know how many parts this is going to be. We really went through it, guys, so stick with me. So the morning after the shower incident, my mother and my sister go upstairs, and her door was wide open, which isn't a big deal because my sister did have her door wide open. But as they go in, it looks like every drawer, her dresser drawer, every drawer was opened up and her clothes were thrown across the room. So by now, we have all come to the conclusion that this house is haunted as fuck, right? Now, we're becoming acquaintances and friendly with some of the neighbors around us, but we're not going to tell them anything that's happening in our house because we don't want them to think we're crazy. But here's the thing. After the shower incident happened, everything went quiet for like 2 months. We didn't hear anything. We didn't see anything. There was nothing strange going on. So we thought, hey, maybe this isn't going to happen anymore. Maybe it was just, some sort of weird fluke. But y'all, that was not the case. So one night I'm laying in my bed. I'm reading my book. I have my door latch locked. And then all of a sudden, every hair on my body stood up. I felt like there was somebody watching me. And you guys know that feeling. That feeling where somebody is watching you and you just get this fear throughout your body. So I shut my book. I slowly sit up. I turn to my door, and y'all, I see the latch slowly go up and slide all the way to where it needed to be to unlatch the lock. And I saw it slowly go up, slowly go to the side. Now, while this is all going on, I'm internally freaking the fuck out, okay? So after the latch unlocked, I'm just sitting there looking at the door, right? And all of a sudden, it just flies the fuck open and it goes boom up against the door. And y'all, I get up and I fucking run. I book it the fuck out. And as I'm running, my younger sister wasn't home. Her door was open. And as I'm running, off of the corner of my eye, I see this huge silhouette, like this huge fucking silhouette. Now, this silhouette had to have been tall-wise, like 6'7", one of the tallest I've ever fucking seen in my life, okay? And this silhouette was big as fuck, and I am just panicked. I am completely panicked. I run downstairs, and as I hit the bottom of the stairs, my mom rushes out of her room, my sister rushes out of her room, and I tell them what happened. We're all freaking out. I'm completely freaked out. And as I'm telling my sister and my mom what happened, all of a sudden we hear another boom. Well, my brother-in-law hears everything. He comes up from the basement. He goes upstairs and he sees that my door was slammed again so hard that part of the frame of the door, part of the frame actually came off. Like, that is how much force there was used to slam that door again. I tell them about the silhouette I saw, and of course, this was a different silhouette than what my sister saw in the shower. So we're all like, what the fuck is going on? So at this time, my older sister says, you know what? I know someone who actually blesses houses, who is a medium. I'm going to get a hold of her, and we're going to see what we can do, because this is just getting absolutely out of hand. So I sleep with my mom that night, and we're very, very on edge, right? Everybody's on edge. Everybody's freaked out. But again, we didn't hear or see anything for a couple of days while this is all going on. Well, my sister comes up to me one day and she goes, Bailey, I have something to tell you. Now, my younger sister was Sam, okay? Sam was the one who lived right by me upstairs on the second floor. She comes up to me, she goes, Bailey, I have something to tell you. And she goes, I know one of the spirits who live here because he talks to me. I am upstairs. He is upstairs with me, and he is a protector of the house. So I'm like, what? Because here's the thing. Me and my family have always been very connected to the other side. And I wasn't very surprised that she was telling me. But she said, yes, I talked to him a little bit, and he says his name is Sir. He doesn't give me any other name. I just know him as Sir. And she said that this was a bigger silhouette. And she said that Sir told her that he was actually protecting us from the other spirit that was in the house because he was very mean and just very cranky. And he said that this man was just very, very upset and spiteful that we were alive and he was not. And he just wasn't a very good person in life either. Now, keep this in mind. I am the only one that my sister has told this to, okay? So I file it away. I say, okay, you know, whatever. I believe her 100%. And then about 3 days later, my sister Kristen's friend comes over to do the cleansing, to do the blessing, and to talk to the spirits. Now, my sister's friend, who's a medium, she goes upstairs for a while. She comes back down. She goes, look, okay, there used to be a father and a son duo who lived here. The father was a very, very mean man. He, you know, everyone who lived in this house, because there used to be, you know, this old man had a son, he had a wife, and he had 2 daughters. Well, the 2 daughters got out, but the son actually stayed with the father. The mother passed away, and he was just horribly mean and to everybody around him. And she said that the older spirit especially didn't like my sister or my brother-in-law because they were together and they were downstairs, you know, they were sleeping together, they were sharing a life, and he did not like that because they weren't married yet. So he found that very offensive. He was very offended by that. Now, she said that this older man's name started with a J, and she said the Sir, she goes, I didn't really get a name out of him. All I heard was Sir. Now, there was an older man that I helped occasionally bring in groceries, or I'd go and talk to him, and he lived across the street. And he told me that he lived there for 50 years. So I decided to go and visit with him. So I'm visiting with him, and I asked him, hey, do you remember who used to live in the house? And he said, yes. About, 10, 12 years ago, there was a man who owned the house. He was very, very mean. He was very, very spiteful, very vengeful. He said if kids were playing on the sidewalk in front of his house, he would throw stuff at him. He would try to spray him with a hose. He was just a horrible, horrible man. And he said that he had an older son who was developmentally delayed mentally. And he said that he would have this older son do things for him, like mow the lawn, take care of the house, do whatever. And he was very towards him. Now, the older man eventually passes away, and then the son got sent away, but he didn't last long either. He was living in some sort of group home for, people who need a little extra help, and he passed away about 3 years after his father passed away. And come to find out, his name was Donald. The son's name was Donald. So we're all completely fucking freaked out by this point, okay? And the medium actually told us that Sir Donald is actually doing a good job at keeping his father away from us because, anything bad that happens, like the frying pan flying across the room, my door slamming open, that silhouette in my sister's, shower, that was him. That was the J name. I believe his name was James, the older man. That was all him. He was the bad one. It was actually Sir Donald who was protecting us, and he was the one who was trying to protect everyone. And everyone in that neighborhood said that they would always look up in our windows when we weren't home, and they would always see this big black silhouette looking out at them. Like, it was a known thing around the neighborhood that this house was hella haunted, okay? Now, I used to do babysitting on the side, and this man, my mom knew him from work. He brought over his daughter. Now, my mom knew this man and his wife. She actually worked with his wife. And we would watch their child during the day because the father worked at nights and the mother worked during the day. So we would watch the little baby. The little baby was a girl. She was about 18 months. And we would watch her during the day. I would watch her during the day, me and my sister. And the first time he dropped off that little girl, he refused to get out of the truck. He called us and he said, hey, do you want to come and get her? And we're like, yeah, sure, whatever. So we came and got her, and he was looking really freaked out Come to find out, his aunt used to live in that house, and he refused to step foot in our house, and he never did, because he said that he was sleeping in one of the rooms upstairs one day, and he wakes up to a big giant silhouette looking at him. Now, we spent a few more months in that house, but it eventually got so bad that we broke our lease and we moved, because there was different kind of like, the landlord wasn't taking care of the house the way he was supposed to. So we used that as incentive. We broke our lease and we moved. But come to find out, everyone who moves into that house all report the same fucking thing that we report. Because we still have friends who live in that neighborhood. And that house is still haunted to this day. And they still have trouble keeping anyone in that home. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments.
I thought the ghost stories about this Arizona water park was just a myth until I experienced it for myself. Scary story time. A number of years ago, I worked as a security guard at a hurricane harbor in Arizona. I originally worked during the day, but shifted to nights in the off season. One of the nights I first worked, a seasoned guard told me that sometimes they hear things at night. I pushed back on him a lot and thought it was just hazing. Called him out thinking he was just trying to spook me. I talked to superiors in the coming days, and they also told me sometimes the voice of a woman is heard at night and people see things. My superior told me she personally heard a woman talking in the bathrooms by the lazy river, which are checked and locked after the park closes. And when they unlocked it in the middle of the night, there was no one inside. I was told before Six Flags owned the park, a woman fell off a slide that no longer exists and passed away. At the time, I couldn't find any info on it, but checked the park history recently. I found it, and it's true. Back when the park was originally Waterworld Safari, a woman did fall off a slide named Kilimanjaro and passed away from a head trauma in 2001. So here is my encounter. One night, I was working with a newer guard overnight. We did our usual patrols to check cameras, gates, and doors. When we got to the cabanas by the wave pool, one of the TVs was still on. Didn't think much of it and shut it off, set the controller back on the table. As we were walking out, the TV turned itself back on. Weird, but wrote it off and turned off the TV again. Then as we continued our rounds, I heard what sounded like a woman talking in the bushes/trees by Mammoth Falls. The other guard didn't hear it, but he knew I wasn't screwing around. At this point, we were thinking some people snuck in or something. Because of the fences and blocked off areas, we had a pinch point. He went around and I went from the other direction and closed in. No one was there. We then finished checking the entire area and nothing. As we were walking away, we then heard someone whistling right from the area we had just finished checking. 100% no one was there. This time he heard it and we fully checked it again. Nothing. If someone was there, they could not have gotten away without us seeing them. After that, we wrap up and head back to the office, talking about how weird that was. I then had to use the restroom. We get back to the office and I get the key for the main guest bathroom right next to the office. When I unlock and open the door, I hear the sound of wet running feet on tile. I immediately radio to the other guard and he sprints over within 15 seconds while I stood by the doorway. The door is the only way in or out. We walked through together on opposite sides. We met in the middle and no one was inside. And that's the end of the story. So this story was found on the Ghost subreddit, although I have seen it around other subreddits that are like paranormal related. So it could be floating around in other parts as well. OP did leave the story just like that, how I finished reading it. That was the end. The story finishes there. They haven't come back to it. They haven't responded to any comments. There were only 2 comments on that story, on that subreddit. And it was just 2 people saying that they believe OP, since OP did mention in the beginning of the story that they're more of a skeptic and they don't really believe in paranormal activity. So when they went through this, it was kind of like, I don't know what's going on. So the 2 commenters did say that they believe OP and they believe that their encounter was real. So what do you think OP really encountered? Did they really encounter some paranormal activity, or was it more of just a figment of their imagination? Let me know.
Okay, so I don't know what to call it, if it's a coincidence, if it's paranormal, if it's just weird, but I feel like I experienced something weird when I went to Savannah, Georgia recently. For context, I just got back from there 2 days ago, and it was a definitely really fun experience. I went with my boyfriend. We had a lot of fun. I'm not necessarily gonna say we had a bad time. It was more just like weird shit happened and it was just a part of our trip. So personally, I do kind of believe in the paranormal. I know a lot of people have opinions on that, and I don't want TikTok thinking I'm crazy, but I'm gonna be honest and open and say I do slightly believe in paranormal activity, and I guess you can consider me like a believer in ghosts. And a lot of people are confused by my mentality because I kind of believe in ghosts, but my whole life I've never experienced paranormal stuff. But in general, I am a pretty spiritual and like open person to like that kind of stuff, so I'm not like closed off to the idea of ghosts being real. But let me just share the story. Let me just get there. So basically, we were there for 2 nights. We were staying in an Airbnb, and the Airbnb was on a very old street in Savannah. It was in the North Historic District, which is an old part of Savannah. It's literally right next to the river area. It's just a very historic area. We're talking about like 1700s, like old. I have been to Savannah 2 other times before this, and I do kind of have weird experiences. I'm not gonna share them right now, but I do believe there is weird shit in Savannah. There was just one instance last time I went that was also pretty weird. But like I was saying, we were staying in an Airbnb for 2 nights, and the first night we were there, this place, very clean, very pretty, nothing suspicious, nothing weird. Of course, it kind of smells a little old. It's an old building, clearly. It is next to a very historic restaurant in Savannah, so it is clearly an old building, which I don't immediately go into an old building and assume it's haunted. Like, I'm not doing that. But the first night my boyfriend and I were there, nothing out of the ordinary, literally nothing weird. Then the second day rolls around, nothing weird happens, and then it's nighttime. My boyfriend and I are in the room. It is 1 a.m. We just have one lamp on to the right of our bed. I'm in bed falling asleep. I mean, I was like literally actively falling asleep, and my boyfriend is to the right of me, and he's on his phone still, because when I went to sleep, like I was just kind of dozing off, like he was still on his phone. And randomly he shakes me awake, which, guys, let's preface, my boyfriend is a total non-believer of any of this. He's a scaredy cat, but he doesn't believe in any of this. If he's watching, it's true, but he does not believe in the paranormal, and I think he's still in denial about it, but that's a different story. But it is 1 a.m. My boyfriend shakes me awake, and he's like, Amelia, I just saw the lights flicker. And I know to some people, like, that's not weird, like, because lights can glitch. But the way he said it was just weird. He's like, it just went, like, on and off and on and off. And guys, for context, this had not happened. If the light actually was glitching, it would have happened right when we got there, because we never had that ceiling light on. The ceiling light was glitching. We never had the ceiling light on. And when I opened my eyes, it was still on. And I know neither of us had turned it on. This ceiling fan was controlled by a remote to the left of the bed on the wall, and you'd actively have to click the remote to turn this light on. Like, that is just so weird. And I know my boyfriend wasn't pranking me because the remote was nowhere near him. I could still see it on the left on the wall. And from the way he's telling me this, I know it's not fake because it's fucking weird. And I know he wasn't pranking me because the light above was on and then it turned off. And we could hear the clicking on the remote. The remote makes a clicky sound. He said he could hear the clicking when the ceiling light fan was turning on and off. And we also heard it click off on the remote. Someone had to turn off that light. Someone had to be by the remote touching it to turn off that light, and it turned off right in front of us. Now, of course, this could be a coincidence because we also lived in a building, or were there in a building with other people who were staying in that older building. Like, it was like a big building that had like lots of different like spaces for different people. So the people above us could have accidentally maybe had the same remote and were like clicking our light on and off. But what are the odds of that happening at 1 a.m.? And we heard no one moving above us. It's a very creaky old house, and you can hear when people are moving. That could be the most probable reason, unless the light was literally glitching, but it didn't happen after that. So if the bulb was bad, or if the remote was glitching, it would have kept happening. And also, we could literally hear the clicks on the remote. So clearly both of us are freaked out. Let's just say we slept with the light on, because we were both kind of shooken up because it was late. Like 1 a.m. is pretty late, and we were like, I was like half asleep, and I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? But we went to sleep. We left the light on because we're obviously fucking freaked out. I'm not turning that light off. And my boyfriend still thinks it was a coincidence, but I'm like, how is it a coincidence if you were so scared and it genuinely shook you up? And also, the coincidences don't add up. Yes, the light could have been glitching. Yes, someone else could have accidentally been controlling our light. But what are the odds of that? I don't know. Like, y'all can leave that up to your own interpretation, but personally, I definitely felt like that had to be paranormal. But I don't just have one story. The second story is a little bit also maybe could have been a coincidence, but these coincidences are not adding up, y'all. My boyfriend and I went to the, I think, biggest graveyard in Savannah. It has very old graves. It's very old, very, very big. It is like a football field size big. It is a huge graveyard. And I think this is the name. I'm going to put it here. But we went there. It was around 11 in the morning. We were just walking around, and I was taking a lot of beautiful photos of graves because there was such beautiful, picturesque graves in this graveyard, and I was taking photos on my digital camera of these graves. We were walking around for probably 15 to 30 minutes, and I get to one specific grave, and I try to take a photo, and my camera says it's dead. Like, it flashes black, and then the little battery thing in the corner starts flashing. So I'm like, oh shit, my battery died, because that's either means your camera died or your battery died, I'm not sure. But I was like, okay, my battery died. So I closed my camera and I try to open it back up just in case maybe it was a glitch. I can open my camera. Like, I can look through my photos on my digital camera, but the second I tried to take a picture, it flashed black and it put in the corner a little, like, battery symbol, like, flashing like it was dead. So I'm like, okay, my camera's dead. So I just turned it off and put it back in my bag, and I was just like, I didn't think twice about it. I just thought my camera died. Tell me why I get home. I just thought I would check to see if my camera actually died. I can take photos. How did my camera magically regenerate? And now it works. Like, this shit's just not adding up to me. Like, it's so creepy looking back at it. And I'm like, why is my camera working now? And it literally, when I was at the graveyard, my camera was saying it's dead. I couldn't take a photo. And I'm not sure if it's disrespectful to take photos of graves. I don't think it's disrespectful. I've researched it. Most people say just don't be, like, on the graves. Like, don't be posing with graves. But I was just taking photos afar from, like, pretty parts of the graveyard. But thank you so much if you watched through this whole video, or I thought I would share my story. Let me know your ghost stories too in Savannah specifically, because that place has crazy ass energy. I don't care what y'all say.
So have you guys heard of the 20-year-old pilot that disappeared in 1978 after he was on a training flight and seen a UFO? Frederick Valentich was doing a training flight over the Bass Strait near Australia and Tasmania. It was at 7:06 p.m. where he alerted the Melbourne Flight Service that there was an unidentified craft following behind him. Now, what they said back to him was that there was no traffic near him. Pretty much like there was nothing to worry about. But he insisted that he's seen a large craft and that it was following him around 4,500 feet behind him. But he said this thing was going fast as fuck, and it went super fast above him, around 1,000 feet. So this back and forth between him and the Melbourne Flight Service goes on for another 5 minutes. He just keeps going on about the updated movements on this craft. He feels at this point like the pilot in the craft is messing with him. It keeps going up and orbiting around him. So the craft has the 4 landing lights that are illuminated, and the craft is super shiny and metallic looking, and it also has a green light on like the outside of it. Now this is what Valentich tells them. So then Frederick goes on to tell them, hey, I'm starting to have engine trouble. Now they tell him at this point that they need him to identify that other craft. But Frederick says it isn't an aircraft. Then, after this, transmission gets cut off. So the last thing that these radio officials heard was a metallic scraping sound. So they thought that he probably just freaked out and crashed, but they sent a search party and could not find Frederick anywhere. The Australian Department of Transport also did a deep dive into Frederick Valentich, and they also could not find any leads of him. So at this point, the only leads they had were eyewitness testimony. So then there's a breakthrough in the case 5 years later. So on this island named Flinders Island, a part from the engine washes up on shore, and it's the same engine matching the serial number on the aircraft Valentich was piloting 5 years prior. So Frederick's father went on to say, after all this was said and done, that his son was extremely interested in UFOs, and in fact was nervous about one day being attacked by one. So it's pretty much widespread believed that Frederick was abducted by aliens in some way, shape, or form. So another piece that kind of ties this together that makes people think that this was indeed an abduction is a farmer claimed that the day after Valentich went missing that he seen a craft flying over his farm, and attached to the side of the UFO was Frederick's aircraft, and it was leaking oil. But nobody can find this fucking unnamed farmer because no one ever got his name. So follow for more creepy shit. Imagine you're just fishing, chilling, having a good day, and then you see a fucking Yeti come from under the water. I'm talking about the Japanese ninjin. So it is a sea monster humanoid creature which originates in Japanese culture, and it's said to roam the Antarctic waters. Back in 2002, Japanese crew members started seeing these creatures, These men were on Japanese whaling ships, and they kept saying they were encountering these large, human-like fish monsters. They were just swimming in the ocean. So in Japanese culture, the ninjin is almost like a similar deal to the yeti. So it's described as a large whale type creature, but it does have the shape of a humanoid. It's said that it has an elongated body, and it has the head of a person. It has limbs like a person, but its skin texture is like a dolphin. Very smooth and pale. So the witnesses say that when you see the ninjin, they swim away pretty quickly. It appears that they're pretty curious about us, but they don't want us to know about them. Now, what makes this ninjin so distinct is the fact that it's in the Antarctic waters, so it is freezing cold. It's not just like a Loch Ness monster or a mermaid. There have been many sightings of the ninjin by Japanese fishermen and other scientists who were researching. Now, from a scientific standpoint, many believe that it was just a squid that's been misdiagnosed. It could be a whale. Some believe that this also could just be purely hallucination from the extreme Antarctic environment. But follow for more creepy shit.
Want to see something scary? Have you ever heard of Thomas Busby's stoop chair? No? Let me tell you about it. This is an oak chair created in 1702 and is currently being held in Yorkshire, England. It is said, in Unaliver, by the name of Thomas Busby owned the chair and cursed it shortly before his execution, so that anyone who sat in it would face a horrible end. Since that curse, sitting in that chair causes misfortune or the loss of life for anyone who chooses to rest in it. There are several documented instances of the misfortune surrounding this chair, including a builder who sat in the chair and fell from a roof hours later, a man who sat in the chair and then crashed into a telephone pole, unaliving tragically, right after sitting in the chair, and in World War II several airmen sat in the chair and never returned from their missions. There's also people who claim just being around the chair has caused them illness or misfortune, but it's really unknown. The exact number of fatalities is unknown, but it was bad enough that the Thirsk Museum took possession of the chair and suspended it from the ceiling so that no one can further sit in it and hurt themselves or others. Although these items interest me, this really isn't a risk that I'd be willing to take. However, if you happen to pass by and see the old oak chair, send me a picture.
Have you ever stumbled across a perfect circle in the forest and wondered if something was watching from the trees? Today, our path leads us deep into ancient forests of Europe, where we'll uncover the legend of the fairy ring, also known as a fairy circle. For centuries, these mysterious circles have been woven into folklore across Europe, each culture telling its own version of what happened beneath the moonlight. Many believed the rings marked places where the Fae gathered to dance beneath the stars. According to legend, if you stepped inside a fairy ring, you might be invited to join them. At first, it might seem harmless. The music is said to be enchanting, the dancing impossible to resist. But many stories warn that once the dancing begins, you may lose all sense of time. What feels like only a few minutes inside the ring could become hours, days, or even years in the human world. Some legends say those who entered were never seen again. Others returned only to discover everyone they loved had grown old or was long gone. Across Scotland and Ireland, fairy rings were believed to be places where the Fae danced beneath the moon. In Germany, some believe the circles marked places where witches gathered on Walpurgis night. In Wales, others believed they were gateways to Annwn, the mystical otherworld. Many farmers refused to plow through fairy rings, believing disturbing Disturbing them could bring terrible luck or anger the Fae themselves. Some legends even warn that if you run around a fairy ring 9 times beneath the light of a full moon, the Fae may reveal themselves. Others caution that doing so simply doesn't let them see you, or let you see them, it lets them see you. Some fairy rings are believed to be hundreds of years old, and the largest known fairy ring stretches for hundreds of meters, its circles still growing after centuries. Whether fairy rings are simply a fascinating natural phenomenon or places where folklore and the natural world intertwine, their mystery has endured for generations. Perhaps some paths are meant to be admired, but never crossed. So what do you think? Would you step inside a fairy ring? Or leave it undisturbed? And what cryptid, legend, or piece of folklore should our path lead us to next? Travel safely, wanderer, and may the forest watch over you.
Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
The person who submitted the story says that what they saw in the middle of the woods when they were out in Cuba one night terrified them so much that till this day they have not been able to get that image out of their head. For the sake of the story, let's call him Ollie. Ollie was living in Cuba with 2 of his friends. One night they decided to go to a nightclub. The nightclub was only about 3 miles away, which wouldn't be that big of a deal. The only issue was that the only way to get there was by taking the bus. They missed the last bus, so their only option was to walk. It was only 3 miles. It was a beautiful night. They decided that they were gonna just walk. As they're walking towards the nightclub, they end up having to cut through some countryside, which left them walking in complete darkness for like a huge portion of the walk. As they're making their way through, they start to hear what sounds like rustling and like moving behind one of the bushes. Thinking that it was probably like a wild animal, they decided to ignore it, but then it like hit them that there really isn't a lot of like wild animals in Cuba, so it couldn't be that. That's when all 3 of them see it. They look over, and right behind the bush they see this head kind of like poke out, and it's a small little man with long raggedy hair and a face so horrific that it almost looked like he was wearing like a Halloween mask, but it wasn't a Halloween mask, it was his actual face. All 3 of them literally run, like they're running for their life because they've never seen anything so horrific in their whole life. So they're running, they run about a mile down the road, they hit like a street, like thinking that at this point they're probably safe, and whatever they saw, like it's gonna just leave them alone, until they start to hear the rustling behind bushes. Once again they look over and they see the same little man standing there. They run once again. At this point they're running like 2 miles on the road. They're almost near like where the city is. They decide to stop to catch their breath, thinking like at this point there's no way that this thing continues to follow us. And just when they think they're safe, they start to hear the noise again, but now it's coming from all different directions. It was almost like there were multiple of these little things that were following them. At this point the 3 men continue to run. They don't stop until they hit the actual town, at which point it finally stops chasing them. All 3 of them say that they have not been the same since this happened. One of them actually ended up going to a healer to try to figure out what the heck was that, and the healer told them that it was a duende, and that apparently there was some gold or like treasure that was buried in those woods, which meant that there was a lot of duendes that were surrounding the area that was protecting that treasure and that would try to scare away any person that would go anywhere near it. If you guys have been following me for a while, then you already know how I feel about duendes. I actually encountered one when I was living at my mom's old house, like growing up over there. There was a duende that we would see from time to time, and it even came after my son when he was a baby. So not a big fan of duendes. Also, we later found out through like a healer that my mom spoke to that apparently that old house had like treasure buried inside of it as well, which we never found. But it now kind of explains why we always had issues with duendes. I don't know.
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me give you guys a story time of this man who died in the city, and then they brought his body back to the villages to get buried. And on the day of his funeral, he came off the bus carrying his bags and walked in. This is something that happened a very long time ago. This is something that my grandmother told me, okay? And I'm gonna act like I was there. We're gonna call this man Mr. M so that we all don't get confused, right? Mr. M was a neighbor of my grandmother in her villages, right? So Mr. M was somebody that worked in the city and used to come back, whatever. One day they had received a letter that he had passed away in the city, whatever, and that the people that he worked for were going to contribute money so that they can bring his body back home, right? Fine, they pay the money and the man is back home, right, with his relatives, whatever. The body's there, they wash the body, it's the day of the funeral, everybody's wearing all black, nice. Fine, my grandmother is like, almost in the morning, sometimes there are families that allow other people to come and view the body, and this time it was those things because my grandmother was not family. She says, fine, they look in the box, the man is really there, whatever. She goes out, other people look, they sit down, whatever. Hibo, the service starts, they are doing whatever they are doing, and there's a bus that comes around at 9 a.m. I think. At that time, it came around at 9 a.m., 12 p.m., 3 p.m., 6 p.m. as well. That was the last bus. The man went on the 9 a.m. bus, right? Gets off the 9 a.m. bus. He's carrying his bags. He's carrying his hat. He's walking. So my grandmother's like, she did not see initially. Other people were looking and people were like, hey, what's going on? And then they were like looking flabbergasted, right? Fine, so they're sitting. My grandma is like, she eventually looks to the side because she felt like these people were disturbing. And she looks to the side and the man that is in the coffin is walking in. Inside the gate, people are shocked. He's confused as to why they're shocked. He looks at everybody and doesn't greet because he can tell that there's a funeral that's going on. He walks inside the yard and he asks like, whose funeral is it and why wasn't I informed that there was a funeral? People are shocked, people are scared, they are even scared to touch him, and he keeps on asking like, what is going on, like, why are you here, what's going on? And eventually like a man comes up to him and is like, we are burying you. So this man is like, no, you're not burying me or whatever. He's like, okay, fine, open the box. People are sitting inside a tent. There is a service going on. They open the box and there's nothing inside that box. And he's like, what games are you playing? Like, I send letters every single time and you guys here burying me. Like, do you want insurance money? The wife is like, how can we want insurance money? Now they're arguing in front of people, right? And these people are just shocked. Nobody knows what's going on. They tell the people they are having a problem. So they open the coffin, guys, there is nothing inside the coffin. They open like the head part, there's nothing. They open the body part, nada. And they decide, you know what, they take the box inside the house and they tell the people to just wait a little bit. They are finishing like the food. They're finishing cooking. They're finishing to cook the food, so they should just wait a bit and then they're gonna eat and then they're gonna leave. They need to solve this as a family. So everybody, like my grandma included, obviously she was with her mom. She's like, they walk inside the room and they start talking and they're confused. They open the thing in the box, there's nothing, guys. And the wife even told this man that your bosses helped us bring your body back. And this man was like, what colonizer do you know, what white man do you know would offer money to a black man? It was during the apartheid era, mind you, would offer a black man money to send his body back home. What colonizer do you know would do something like that? And it was just confusing to them, whatever. And then the man eventually like left, whatever, to go back to work. And he used to come back each and every single weekend to check on his family because in his head, he felt like his family were trying to do something to him. Also, he took his wife to his workplace at one point. He took his wife to where he used to stay and they went to the workplace. They explained the situation and his bosses were also confused because they don't know this man is dead. Like, he was there just not so long ago, so they don't know what they are talking about. And so it is very confusing and they don't know what happened because nobody can explain what happened. And the people at the funeral ate the food and everybody went home and that was it.